like to get started, and so good to see many of you back after a wonderful day yesterday. I think it was a great day. I mean, it's just exciting to have so many people here yesterday. There are more people that are coming back, and we had some just great comments as people were reflecting about the opportunity to just be able to get into the room together. So many of you know each other in the work that you do, but rarely do we have the opportunity to all be in the same room and have an extended period of time to really talk about a few things. So I don't know if any of you want to just share a few reflections. Not everybody was here yesterday, unfortunately, but after last night, I'm sure you went out and everybody went right home and went to sleep. But does anybody have any reflections about yesterday that they want to share before we get started? Get you going early in the morning.
I was very impressed to hear about the work that Project Hope is doing with that project for children's homes. I was really happy to hear about that. That's an incredible project because I think that a lot of times that issue gets lost in the bigger picture. People don't think enough about the homelessness of the children and the impacts that it has upon their education.
You have one other reflection before we get started? I can call on you guys. Coach. You want to introduce yourself because this is one of our special guests.
Hi, Dr. Boti Esimachi from the Esimachi Foundation in Trinidad and Tobago. Guys, welcome to have your next meeting in Trinidad.
Well, Otik learned about this literally about maybe a week or 2 weeks ago. Wrote me an email and said that when he heard about the Roundtable, they want to do things in Trinidad and Tobago. Could he come? I said, yes, you can come.
And, well, like Dr. Franklin said, we're about implementing a critical career pipeline in East Coast States. We say high needs neighborhood. People say high risk because crime, violence, and poverty. But we say high needs. Our organizations primarily focus on empowering men, working with fathers. That's why I always say, where are the dads in all of this? But we're just about to start working on implementing a critical career pipeline. And, speaking with Dr. Franklin, we need to talk, and the whole community-based approach, has, and all the presentations yesterday has kind of broadened my horizon as to how to implement an effective program, that will have significant impact and measured outcomes. I think all the presentations were good. I left with my head full. I'm going to be downloading on Saturday. I showed Dr. Franklin. They've already organized a meeting, so I have to, get as many notes as possible. I know you're going to send everything, but I'm taking the pictures because we're supposed to come as a team and they're asking every second, what are you guys doing? What are you learning? We're really glad to be here. Everybody has been very helpful, and I'm sure you're going to be proud of the what's it called now? The Promised Neighborhood in East Coast Spain. Thank you very much.
How he could come up here. He's a cardiologist or
cardiac surgeon.
Cardiac surgeon, and he said, "Don't don't worry, he has people in his practice covering for him. A couple of days that he's not here. But it's a testament to his commitment. My reflection is the same as last night. I'm very, very just enamored of the passion that everybody has for this kind of work. So at this time, I want to welcome you again to the second day. We have a full day of exciting presentations, and I want to turn this segment over to my illustrious friend and colleague and buddy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So my job this morning is to introduce, kind of lay out just quickly what's happening today and then do an introduction. So wanted to make sure, I know people have the agenda in front of them, but I like to just kind of make sure we're on the same page. So this morning we'll be hearing, yesterday we talked a lot about specific strategies, initiatives, programs being implemented with a number of partner organizations in partnership with DSNI through Boston Promise. Today we are going to lift it up a little and talk about the federal level. So you all know that Promise is a part of the federal U.S. Promise Neighborhoods Initiative. And so we are going to hear about what's going on at the federal level and what is the kind of national context within which we're doing this work. Then I mentioned yesterday we have our guests from Chula Vista, California, who are going to share the successes and challenges of their Promise neighborhood, and hopefully we'll see some things that we can learn, and hopefully they're learning from us as well. But we thought it was important to do an exchange and really finding out, though there's a lot of good practice in Boston, there's also a lot of other places where there's good work happening. So they'll be talking in the morning after Elson, and then prior to lunch, we'll be talking about what exactly is the impact or the value that Promise has had over the last 4 years, based off of a number of things, including feedback we've received from you all, actual impact we've had with children and families in the Dudley Village campus, and then some lessons we've learned, because this was a huge undertaking for DSNI, and there was things that we had to do structurally to figure out how to really implement Promise, and so we'll be talking about some of those lessons and challenges that we've had. And then the afternoon will be shorter than yesterday. We'll be out of here by 2, so we'll actually during lunch, get our lunch, go back into the groups that you ended in yesterday. And so for people that weren't here at the end, you do have a colored dot on your name tag, so you go into that group and start to, your group members that were here yesterday will just catch you up, share with you what was talked about at the end of the day. They took a lot of notes, so they'll share those. And then we'll do some action planning. And so people will, you will have the task of saying, okay, here's what we've seen over the last 2 days. Maybe here's questions we still have, or things that weren't addressed. And then here's the steps that we think we all need to be taking together in general, but I put some boundaries around it. So thinking about the next 6 months, the next year, and then by the end of 2017, which is when the federal portion of Promise Neighborhoods, at least for us, is ending. So that's our day today. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Elsa Nash, who's the team lead for Promise Neighborhoods in the U.S. Department of Education. He's also newly become our program officer, but he knows us very well. And so I wanted to, you know, people in Boston are tough and they kind of look at you like, who are you and who are you to be sharing information? It's hard here. I'm a transplant, so I know that you have to kind of prove yourself to people in Boston. So I did ask him to give me, I just wanted to name a couple of other roles he's had, just to put in context that though he is the team lead for Promise Neighborhoods, there's other work that he has done that lends itself to his perspective on Promise. So prior to being in this role, which he's been in the U.S. Department of Education for 4 years and in the federal government for 14 years, he was the Deputy Director of the White House Council on Community Solutions. He's also served as the Acting Director of Learn and Serve America, and that was in a role he had in the Corporation for National and Community Service, who administers AmeriCorps, is usually how people know them. And then I thought this was important, given particularly who DSNI was. He told me way back in the day. He was the director of a CDC in Atlanta. And so he also really understands the housing and economic development side of this work as well. So he's gonna come give us a federal perspective. Elson is awesome. I feel like he really cares about the work that we're doing and sees a lot of potential And so he's here really to share, but also he has a different perspective and can advise us on kind of where we fit into what's going on in the country and how we can strengthen what we're doing. So, Elsa Nash.
So thank you, Sheena. As I was coming in a couple days ago from the airport, and Sheena knows this about me, usually when I come to communities, I get engulfed in the community. And the way in which I do that is I catch public transportation everywhere. And so one of the things I did was I caught public transportation from the airport to the footprint, and I put myself in the perspective of residents. Because early on when I was reviewing, early back in the day, reviewing the applications for all of our promised neighborhoods, I would always put myself in the perspective of the beneficiaries of services. And so one of the things that stood out early on about Dudley Street to me was the challenge that residents had in getting out to the footprint. So here I was putting myself in the perspective of residents. And as I finally got to the Dudley Street station on the Silver Line, I then started, and of course, you're not supposed to have your cell phone out. So I'm saying to myself, I gotta remember everything. I can't have my cell phone out. I gotta remember everywhere that I'm going. And so I forgot the specific address. And so instead of going to the correct address of DSNI, I ended up on the opposite side of town. Now see, Juan and Sheena don't know this, but I was about 3 miles away. Now mind you, I'm a walker. So I walked 3 miles in the opposite direction down Malcolm X Boulevard. And so I was like, oh, I don't believe this. But while I was walking, I met people. And I met a pregnant mom, and she was from Cape Verdean, so I know we've got some Cape Verdeans in the house. But she was struggling. She was not too far from the Social Security office, and she was trying to get somewhere else. And she said, don't you know where to go? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. She told me the address, and of course I remember walking past it. And I gave her the directions, but what was interesting, other people had given her directions and she didn't trust them. But yours truly must have looked pretty trustful, because when she looked at me, she embraced me. I could have been the hustle and bustle DC person and not stopped, but I stopped and talked to her. And I took the time to direct her. And it was an important piece for me, because once again, I remembered back in reviewing the application for DSNI that transportation for residents was a critical issue. So I bring that up because I know that AJ had a wonderful quote, to talk about the many spiders make a web and tying down the line. I want to add this quote to that, and it's a Swahili quote. And the quote is, the area covered by your life is not as important as what you can build on it. The area covered by your life is not as important as what you can build on it. And the reason I say that is, we all have titles, we all have roles, we all have seeking recognition, but ultimately for me, it's not about the title, it's what I can prepare for other people in this world, what I can prepare for the children. Ultimately, that's what all of us care about. We care about the children, the next generation. And I can tell you that every promised neighborhood I come across, the bottom line is the children. And so as we look at the results, as we look at our partnerships, don't lose focus on the foundation from which you're building upon. You might have your disagreements throughout the day, throughout the years, but ultimately, you've got to benefit the children. So this new era for education, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is the successor to the Elementary and Secondary Ed Act. Many of you remember that, No Child Left Behind. So this new legislation, it's a new law. The Department of Ed has taken several steps to help states, district schools, and the community. And so we're in listening mode right now. And it's a challenging place to be because we know that many of you are ready to implement. And we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So, of course, the president really had a lot of support, bipartisan support. We didn't know it was going to pass. It passed, and all of us were extremely happy that this occurred back in December. So the idea is that it ensures opportunity for all students. Once again, I talked about for all children. All students have and are held to high academic standards, preparation for college and career, provides more kids access to high quality preschool, reduces the burden of testing, promotes local innovation, and invests in what works. I'll come back to that a little bit later. This really is, as we talked about earlier, the cradle to career pipeline. This is the pipeline. This is the work that you all are doing. The challenge of Promise is that we do a little bit of everything. And the challenge for you all is to take what is important to you and translating it into that college to career pipeline. And so for DS&I and Boston, how do you take what you do well and focus it so that you can have the results for children and their families? So the competitive grant programs, the division that I'm in is innovation and improvement. So we have a number of programs, the I3 program, investing in innovation. The two programs that I'm in charge of, Promise Neighborhoods and Full Service Community Schools. We've got the Charter Schools program, Magnet Schools Assistance program. We also have an arts program. And so as we talk about some of the incredible work that DS&I does in the arts space, we also have an arts program that you all can take advantage of. So once again, with the Every Student Succeeds Act, and as we talk about the previous ESEA Act, this idea of supporting distressed communities from birth through college is something that Promise and also Full Service has a focus on. We see the eligible entities, institutions of higher education, tribes, nonprofits, in partnership with local government. And so this really is about the work of Promise. So I'm going to take a quick moment, but comparing ESEA to ESSA and how the new law looks at some of the things that you'll be able to do. So previously we had two types of competitions. We had a planning grant and implementation grants. Under ESSA, it is one grant program. And so essentially what you have the opportunity to do within the one grant program is you have the opportunity to do planning the first 2 years, and then the last 3 years it's all implementation. The reason I mention all of this, which is really important, that a lot of our sites have been thinking about, is their next act. And does it preclude DS&I or whoever would want to apply for a Promise grant? Does it say that you can't apply since you've got a Promise grant in Dudley Street? No, you can apply, but the issue is that it has to be in another community. It can't be in the same community. And so if you had a community that needed to do planning, could you apply for this new grant program? Absolutely. What that means is that the first 2 years, you have the opportunity to use the grant program for your planning activities. The next 3 are for implementation. We talk about some of the limitation of funds on early learning assessments. It gives some outlines on some of the ideas and activities related to early learning. Once again, as we talked about some of the things related to early learning yesterday, these are some of the things that you can't do, some of the limitations. But I think, once again, I don't think that this will preclude you for doing the types of activities that you've been doing here in Dudley Street. There's some operational flexibility. Here's the piece that I think you all need to recognize, and it's something that we've talked about yesterday. It's something that our friends at Chula Vista will talk about, and that is this whole notion of using data and having data available publicly. So one of this whole notion of transparency is an important notion. And so as you, community, start thinking about if you would like to apply for another round of promise in a different specific community, this whole notion of transparency and posting of data is something that is now a requirement. So the idea of being transparent, the idea of showing your outcomes and making sure that it's publicly available is something that is now a requirement under ESSA. Duration of grant award. So this is another piece that has kind of caused some controversy. We know that many folks recognize that we recognize that this work is a journey. We've had organizations say it's a 10-year journey. And we know that, we recognize that, but then we had to balance the realities of grant making. So the 5-year term of the award is actually seen as rather long in the federal world. The interesting thing about it, the compromise in terms of promise that was made was that there was an additional possibility of 2 more years. The additional possibility of 2 more years for those who get the grant under the new legislation. And so there is the compromise, recognizing that it is at least a 10-year journey. But this idea that under federal regulations, under federal experience, 5-year grants typically have been something that has been considered long. Within the compromise was, how do we add additional years? So it's the option of 2 more years. The details of that are still being worked out, and that's something that you all need to consider as we're taking public comments and things like that related to the implementation of ESSA. The last piece that I think is really important for you all to think about is this whole notion of evidence. So throughout the Obama administration, this notion of evidence-based practice has been brought up time and time again. Well, now it's authorized in language. And so the notion of making sure that there's a priority of evidence-based practices and evidence-based activities will be looked at under grant review. And then as folks continue to have their grants, how are you applying evidence-based practice to the work that you're doing? So, where are we now in the FY17 request? So the president requested $128 million for FY17. That's a $54.7 million increase over FY16. In FY16, we had about $73 million. That is a great thing for us. What that means, FY16, we have a new grant competition. When will the notice be out? I don't know. I mean, literally, it is going through the approval process. Yours truly is the writer of that notice, and there are a whole lot of hoops in the whole federal realm that we have to get approvals from. And so literally got an email this morning of all the changes that have to occur. So it depends on how many more hoops that I've got to get approval from to get this thing through so that it can be out on the streets. So that amount is about $30 million, which means that there will probably be about 5 new grant awards. So once again, the grants are 5-year grants, up to $6 million per year for 5 years. So our hope is that we'll be able to award 5 new grants before the end of the calendar year. Before the end of the calendar year. What does that mean in terms of translation? That means my summer, the peer review summers are going to be spent reviewing the grant applications. What does that mean more specifically? I'd say in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we hope to have something out on the street. So I can't give you definites, but hopefully that gives you a time frame. The other piece that's critically important in all of this that we try to do in terms of transparency, we have the old applications posted on our website. So go to ed.gov, type in Promised Neighborhoods, and then you'll see old applications up there. It's important for you to review and look at the old applications. We don't have the budgets, but we have the narratives. Will this year's notice be drastically different from the notice that was in 2012? No, it won't. There will be some changes, but no drastic changes. And so what I tell everyone, look at the old notice and look at the applications from the other, the current grantees that are posted on the website. That's going to be critically important for you to do. The other program, real quick, that I run is Full Service Community Schools. Back in 2008, Boston Public Schools had a Full Service Community Schools program. That program is important because it's the sister program of Promised Neighborhoods. Think of Promised Neighborhoods at the school-based level and wraparound supports at the school-based level. And so there's a nice marriage between Full Service Community Schools and Promised Neighborhoods. We have a number of full-service community school grantees that have graduated to be Promised Neighborhoods. So imagine taking it at the local level, meaning school-based level, and then expanding it to a footprint. So this is background information around full service. There has been some changes within full service. I won't bore you with the details because I want you to hear from our colleagues from Chula Vista. But I think there are some overlaps. Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, both Promised Neighborhoods and Full Service are under the same umbrella. So you've got some similar requirements related to full service that are congruent to Promised Neighborhoods. Once again, interesting new things under full service, coordinating at least 3 existing pipeline services. Sounds familiar. Pipeline services with Promised Neighborhoods, with full service, at least 3. This whole notion of evidence, as I mentioned before, it applies to full service. Here's one, evaluation. And so the other piece, as you all continue to do your work, this whole notion of evaluation is a critical piece. So evidence-based, use of data, and evaluation. Sounds like a song, and hopefully it's a good song. But those things tie closely to each other. And so to the degree that you're able to conduct an evaluation, have a nice evaluation partner, i.e. Boston College, that can help you out. So I think that's an important point for you all to think about as you are looking at issues related to evidence-based, looking at issues related to evaluation. For full service, currently it's the same amount as FY16, $10 million. I can tell you there is great support on the Hill for full service, so I wouldn't worry about the $10 million. They may end up getting more given that there's a lot of support on the Hill for full service as well. So consider that as an option for those of you who are really interested at the school-based level. And so last but not least, as we transition to the elementary, the Every Student Succeed Act, we will continue to look for input from the broader community. Recognize that there are opportunities for you to engage your state and also your local school districts, because our huge programs like the previous Title I program, there are opportunities for you to provide some direction that's needed on how funds are administered in your state and also in your locality. So make sure that you take the opportunity to look at the Act. Look for opportunities where at the community level, as you talk about resident engagement, you can perhaps direct some of those funding opportunities. And then last but not least, look for ways in which we can enhance, or you can enhance, the way in which Promised Neighborhoods and Full Service Community Schools is administered. So with that, I want to transfer, or at least move us over to our colleagues from Chula Vista, California. I've had the opportunity to be in their footprint. At the time, I didn't get a chance to walk their community, but I think I took the trolley out there. I took it as far, usually I take it as far as I can go. So wonderful community. As Sheena asked me to look for similarities, look for ways to connect communities together, I thought both Kathy and Mauricio would be great partners in this. I know Juan is here, and I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for the Boston community to, at some point, do a little field trip down to Chula Vista. What's the song? Take a little trip, take a little trip. So you want to take a little trip to Chula Vista. So there you go. So with that, Kathy Limbo and Mauricio, if you can come up and share some of the experiences that you have in Chula Vista. Thank you.
Hi. As Elson said, we're Kathy and Mauricio, and I'm going to tell you something about me is I do not follow PowerPoint, so it's not you, it's not you're crazy, it's me who has a little bit of a difficult time. See, I have to click, and you know I'm going to stop clicking. He's going to take a little more. So that I have some credibility here, I am a native New Yorker. Originally. And the only reason I went to California was for the weather, okay? So I do love the East Coast, and I'm happy to be back in Boston. I haven't been there in a very, very long time. And I want to thank you for having us today. We really love sharing and learning from other people because that's how we do better. And when people use words like best practices, for us it's looking at what other people are doing that works really well. Our organization was founded in 1971. No, I haven't been there since then, but I've been there 30 years. When I came to South Bay Community Services, we had 6 staff. We now have over 550 staff. We have grown over the years based on the needs and the direction of the community. One thing that has always stayed with us is we feel we are community owned and operated. And it really is reflective, and as my HR director says, we do nothing by chance, we do it by design. 6 of our 9 upper management staff are from the communities that we serve. 75% of our overall staff are from the communities that we serve. 8 of my 9 board members, 8 of my 11 board members are from the communities that we serve. One, who's not from the community, owns a small business there and is very active in the community. The other one lived in the community, was one of the assistant superintendents, but moved out so she could live downtown in a high-rise. And the last one is a young man that worked in the community for a number of years and now has gotten a job outside the community. So it's something that we really believe in, and it's something that we've done for many years. We provide a range of services, from health and developmental services for 0 to 5-year-olds all the way to affordable housing development. We also do a lot of work in the juvenile justice system and in the child abuse system. The other thing about us is we use our programs to push policy changes within not only our local community, but at the county level and the state. And an example I'll give is we have a program that we started last year, Alternatives to Detention for Juvenile Offenders. And I am happy to say that in year 4, we've convinced the county to not only take the program countywide, but also to take $1 million of money that they were putting in incarcerating young people and put it into prevention and early intervention. And for the Board of Supervisors to have a policy now, which is called Policy A92, wherein how we treat juveniles who are incarcerated. So that's something that we try to do. This is the community that we serve. Someone yesterday said, where's Chula Vista? So right there is the border between Mexico and the United States. We serve from up in National City all the way to the Mexican border as an organization. Our footprint for Promise Neighborhoods is a community called the Castle Park community within the city of Chula Vista, which is a small community. That community was picked by many of our partners in the school district because it was where the worst performing schools were and some of the most needed services being needed and lack of services there. We have 34 partners. Sheena was saying something, a challenge. Having 34 partners is really good, but it's just as challenging as the fact that I grew up with 14 male cousins in my neighborhood. It's the same kind of challenges. When we embarked on Promise Neighborhoods during our planning grant, we wanted to really look at what the community looked like. So we hired our San Diego Association of Governments, which is sort of our regional planning entity. But we said that, you know, they can ask a lot of questions and we may get people that will answer the questions, but we really want to dive deep into those questions. So what we did is we hired right away 15 what we call promotores. And what promotores historically have been is health educators. But we, over the years, I always say our promotores is promotores plus. We've really done a lot of work in addition to health education, is really building the capacity in the community for not only for them to do education in the community around health issues, but around education issues, around violence issues, just different economic issues, housing issues. So we sent them out with these young researchers. And I'll give you an example of why we thought it was really important. One of the questions that was asked on our assessment was, do you talk to your children about college? 96% said, yes, we do. When the promotores asked the question, well, what's the conversation that you have? The overwhelming majority said, well, we tell them we're not the type of people that go to college. We can't afford college. So that really informed what we had to do. Where if we had listened to the original answer, we would have said, okay, we don't have to worry about the college issue. When we look at our community, 67% of the adults in the community did not have a high school education. So it was not surprising that the answer to what about college is people like us don't go to college. I forgot my glasses. 62% of the adults receive some kind of financial education, and 88% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so what the district does in that case is they give everybody free and reduced lunch. Oh, thanks, Mauricio. I need a keeper. 62% of the kindergarten-age children had not attended preschool, even though there were some Head Start resources in the community. And what that's about, and so we designed our services that way too, in the culture in this community, people really prefer for their children to stay with auntie, with grandma, with their tia, is that even if preschool isn't available, that's who they want to take care of their children. They feel safer, they feel better about it. So we had to think about, okay, when we went to design programs. 58% of the students are English language learners. 57% of the middle school students and 33% of the high school students weren't meeting the proficiency in math and in English. So this is a small neighborhood. We went really small, and I was a little nervous when we were putting in the application. I kept saying to staff, this is too small for this amount of money. It's 33 census blocks. There's 6,700 residents. And as I said, we have 34 local partners. And I want to talk about our partners a little bit, because I hate the word collaboration. I'm really sorry. I just hate that word. Because I don't think it really describes true partnerships. The people, the first 28 people that came to the table with us were people we've been at the table for years, where we've been at the table together with no money on the table. Not all 34 of our partners get money either. It's really about people who are working in the community and entities that are working in the community that really feel that they have an obligation to this community, and they're going to stay there even when the funding is gone. We brought in some new partners, but we were very strategic about that. They were partners that were doing some special things in a community or two over. We knew their commitment to those communities, and we brought them in, and now they have buy-in within the Castle Park neighborhood. So this is what we came up with, is Cradle to Career Pipeline. So we did this enormous assessment. We went to see the Harlem Children's Zone. Partners came with us, including one of the school superintendents. We have to deal with in this neighborhood, two school districts, because we have an elementary school district and then we have a middle school, high school district. Our middle school, high school district is the second largest middle school, high school district in the state of California, only second to Los Angeles. So as an organization, we have to deal with 4 elementary school districts and a middle school, high school district. So that has some challenges to it, but it has some interesting as we say, things for evaluation, because our elementary school district, we have a superintendent, and at the beginning it had a superintendent and administration that were so gung-ho about this, and we had a principal that, to put it lightly, was a little bit of a challenge. And in the middle school, high school district, we had 4 of the 5 board members under indictment, and we had an embattled superintendent, but we had these great principals. So we always say, which do you want? Because we couldn't have both. So we came up with this pipeline to services, and I'll give you an example of why for us the needs assessment was so important. In really looking at preschool, we really looked at if we do professional development for preschools, and we open a preschool, and we do professional development for licensed daycare centers, whether they're family run or professionally run, we're not going to get to every baby. And what I say to my early education director all the time, I said, I want to know every day where every baby is and who's taking care of those babies. And so what we do is we actually do professional development for whoever is taking care of that baby, whether it's grandma, grandpa, the guy next door, the lady next door, is we provide that both at center base, but also in the homes too, because we think it's really important. We don't want to change people's culture, we want to enhance the culture. So, as I say to Helena all the time, where are my babies? And do every one of my babies have someone taking care of them that knows how to get them ready for school? She's a retired former principal, and I think she thinks I'm worse than her superintendent ever was. The other thing that we have within our footprint is we have a preschool for kids who've been exposed to violence, both domestic violence and child abuse. As I stand before you today, I have 4 children in that preschool have witnessed their mothers murdered. One of the things, and this was before Promise Neighborhoods, is we opened it 10 years ago. One of the things that we were looking for in this preschool is, can you have a preschool like this with children that have witnessed this kind of violence, may still be in dysfunctional homes, may be in the foster care system, but can we get them school ready, and can what we do for them sustain over a period of time? We're happy to say, and the name of it is Mi Escuelita, is that we had UCSD look at it 2 years ago to see if, and we had children as old as 5th graders who'd been in the school, and what we were very pleased with, we were looking for our kids at least to come average with the general population in the school district. We're seeing that the children who attended Mi Escuelita are actually performing better than their counterparts in the school district. So we see that we can maintain that. Next year we'll get to see if it maintains through 6th grade, which I think is a very important thing to look at, which Mauricio will talk about with 6th graders after that. So Mauricio, I think it's your turn, isn't it?
Yes.
It is? Okay.
So I'm going to go down and actually put in a brief video that was done in year 1. But one of the things we thought is KPBS came down and they visited Chula Vista Promise neighborhoods in our community, and they put together a brief video. So I'll just put on the video real quickly, and then from there I'll talk about the pipeline of solutions that we worked on with our partners, and then move into the data section. So let me just go back real quick. I did this last night. I vetted this last night, so I'm going to hope it works here.
10-year-old Emily Jimenez Avion wants to be a doctor. To do that, she knows she'll need to go to college. And to get there, she's willing to make some sacrifices. For the moment, that includes giving up her quinceañera, the equivalent of a coming out party that many Mexican-American families throw for their daughters' 15th birthdays.
I don't want to have like a dream because I want to save money and for education university.
That's right. She wants to save the money to go toward college. Her mother, Gladys Young, says this is a new outlook for her daughter and her family.
Before we didn't talk a lot about it, but the people from Promise came with the mentality of helping the mothers from the time they're pregnant and helping them so that their children do well, little by little, and to college.
Castle Park's Promise Neighborhood Program is one of about a dozen Promise neighborhoods across the country. The federal government has set aside about $100 million for programs like these over the last 3 years. Last year, a partnership of almost 30 organizations in Castle Park got a $48 million 5-year grant to provide what's being called cradle to career support for the neighborhood's children and families.
We saw a lot of gaps in services, and we saw a lot of what was keeping kids from being successful in school or keeping kids from going to college.
That's Catherine Lambeau. She's CEO of South Bay Community Services, the group leading the Promise neighborhood. She says getting more children to go to college is the goal of the whole effort.
You had parents, 96% of the parents saying they wanted their children to go to college, but then, and they talked to their kids about it, but then when we asked them what they were talking to them about, is that we can't afford it, you can't go to college.
But changing that mentality is a tall order in a neighborhood like Castle Park, where English proficiency is low, 2/3 of adults don't have high school diplomas, and more than half of households don't have a full-time breadwinner. Lambeau says that's why they have to start early.
There's an early learning network, and that has to do with preventing any gaps or getting rid of the gaps that kids have even before the end of school.
That network includes a new preschool Lambeau is visiting today on the Castle Park Elementary campus, where students are learning in English and Spanish. But it also includes newborn home visits by family clinic doctors that are part of the Promise neighborhood, and parenting classes called Universidad de Padres, or Parent University. Gladys Ayon says those classes have given her the tools to get involved with her daughter's education.
This helped me a lot because in my daughter's classroom, everything is in English, and the teacher gives me all the work in Spanish so I can explain it to her. This helped me a lot because now I communicate a lot with the teacher. It helps me a lot with my daughter because I struggle a lot with English.
IOM is also spending more time on the school's campus, not just in classes, but planting and tending this parent-run garden that was paid for with Promise neighborhood dollars. Evidence of those dollars is everywhere on campus, from in-class and after-school tutors to an after-school computer lab where students can catch up on reading skills. The school's resource teacher, Kim Kayado, says the school is also connected with services now that help keep kids in school and learning.
We had a family that needed immediate help with shelter, and so we went through the Promise neighborhood. We asked them if they could do a referral, and they helped them through the whole process.
Those connections have only been in place since school started at the end of July, but Kayado says they're starting to pay off.
We're still working on it. We just started, but yes, we're already seeing a difference because we're getting so much support from calling parents, asking them why they're absent. So last week we were celebrating that we did really well with our attendance.
But being on campus isn't enough. On a recent afternoon, the Promise neighborhood's promotoras were getting ready to go knocking on doors to recruit for one of their programs.
We can actually invite not just the 55 and older to this workshop, everyone's invited.
Cindy Gonzalez became a promotora after years of volunteering at her son's school, Castle Park Middle, which is also part of the Promise neighborhood.
We are the eyes, the ears, and especially the voice of the community. We're there to inform the community of everything that we're learning, and we're also there to navigate them through all the programs.
The promotoras are neighborhood residents, so Gonzalez says parents trust them in a way they may not trust school administrators. If parents are more comfortable, they'll open up and let promotoras know what services they may really need. Gonzalez says she's seen firsthand what the influx of support and extended school day programs from the Promise neighborhood can mean for students.
I would hear every morning, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to school. And it was a struggle.
But along with Promise neighborhoods came a new philosophy at her son's middle school.
It holds them accountable for not going to school, for not doing their homework. And he would have to make up his days on Saturdays. I stopped hearing that every morning at the middle school because he knew there's consequences.
Now she says her son's in high school outside the neighborhood, but he knows college is in his future. Gonzalez says they're planning for him in ways they didn't for his older sister.
We didn't have all the information. I'm sure the school had it, but it wasn't readily accessible to us at the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got involved also, was because I wanted to share that information with the community also.
When the 5-year grant ends, the schools and organizations will have to find other ways to keep successful programs running. Lembeau says they'll be gauging success in a lot of different ways. They'll be looking at how many infants and toddlers have access to medical care somewhere other than an emergency room. They're asking parents how much they read to young children. They're also tracking things like high school graduation rates, college enrollment, and test scores. But Gonzalez is looking for something else.
I'm hoping that the community wakes up and realizes that they have a voice and that they can make a difference in their communities and their schools for their children.
That kind of change, she thinks, might outlast any program. Kyla Calvert, KPBS News.
So you got to see Cindy, and Cindy is one of our promotoras who's now working full-time with us. The promotora model goes across the whole pipeline. So you heard about our early education piece, and that's all the way to 3rd grade. Additional professional development that we built into Promise Neighborhoods was actually for the teachers in the 5 schools, because there was a big discussion during the planning that teachers didn't feel supported, and of course there was a big argument of whether they were right or wrong. Well, it doesn't really matter if they're right or wrong. They didn't feel supported, so we needed to build in supports that they wanted. The other thing is, in the elementary school, we're able to have English language learning coaches for the teachers. So instead of trying to send them out into the community, we're trying to develop that skill in the teachers. And the same for in the preschools. In the middle school, and this was right away something that we wanted, is we started with the Academic Advocate Program. And this is a best practice based on private baby Ivy League schools. So we took a best practice from those who were getting kids into college all the time, where what we do is we start in 7th grade and an academic advocate ends up with 50 kids. And they stay with those 50 children and their students all the way to college and after they get in college. And it's working with the students on what is it going to take for you to go to college, but also working with the family on how can you afford this, what is the best strategy to take. One of the things that we learned that we weren't that prepared for is in our first year we had students who ended up getting them into schools, and we had one young lady who got a full ride to Oberlin. Well, her parents didn't want her to go. Because it was not in their culture for their young girl to go away. The academic advocate that we had working with that family herself had struggled with that, her family, when she went to college. We're down in San Diego County. USC is in Los Angeles. It's about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive on a good day of traffic. She commuted to USC for 4 years because her family would not let her go to USC, and she showed her family. Of course, all her brothers and sisters got away to go to school, but she was able to work with the family because she understood parents who had those feelings. We had another young girl who got a partial scholarship to University of Virginia, and actually the family moved with her. So we had our for-profit partner, Manpower, help the family find jobs in Virginia. So it's that kind of work that you have to start to do. The other thing that we do in the middle school is we do a lot of after-school programming that is not only recreational, but also academically and linked to the day, so that a teacher who a young person has struggled in the classroom that day, maybe failed a quiz, didn't do their homework, they're able to send this folder to the after-school program so that we can start working with them in the after-school program. And we've actually hired some teachers with that too, to work in it. In all of that, we continue to have the promotoras working on parent engagement and community engagement, and really getting the parents to see the school as a community center, places that they can come in. So we've taken English as a second language courses that we were holding in family resource centers, and we're holding them on the school campus. We actually do our food bank and Feeding America distribution on the school campus instead of back in our centers. So we've tried to embed a lot in the neighborhood at the schools. We also not only serve all the kids who go to the now 6 schools that we serve, but also the kids that live in the neighborhood and the families that live in the neighborhood, and people without children that live in the neighborhood, because we really see this as a capacity building. This is about when we're not there anymore, that it lives on in the community. And you can't take away the things that community members have led and things that they have learned, that will stay there. So even with the academic advocate program, we're training the parents on how you get your kid to school, so now they become the neighborhood expert. And we also don't have to work with their children, their younger children. So that's the kind of work we did within the pipeline. One of the pieces of the pipeline at the end, we weren't prepared for, and we've had to make adjustments for the amount of time, especially in the first 2 years of college, that our students need from the academic advocates. And we should have thought about it, but we didn't think about it, so now we're having to adjust our academic advocate program so they can stay in touch with these young people as they struggle, just like I struggled, everybody struggles in that, especially that first crucial year of college. And now Mauricio's going to talk about data and outcomes because he loves it.
Hello, good morning. Before I jump into that, just a little bit about myself is I grew up in Tijuana, which is across the border in Mexico, and I actually used to cross the border every day to go to school. Parents were U.S. citizens, however, we couldn't afford to live in the United States, and the rents were a lot cheaper. So I was one of those kids every day across the border. I've been working for South Bay Community Services for 18 years now. Actually started first year of college, we had a social worker come in and present, and in that moment I figured, you know what, that's why I showed up to school today, because this is my calling. I live in the community, proud to live in the community, and I think the best part about my work is that I affect change in the same place that I work. Interesting thing is, yesterday as we were sitting down, there's so many similarities between this community and Chula Vista. I think the same struggles are happening. So in many ways, I've been paying attention and learning from you guys at the same time thinking what hopefully there's some knowledge that we can impart to you guys as well, so we can create a learning community and exchange information and ideas. But with that said, I'll jump into, so what are our outcomes, right? And right before I just jump into the outcomes, I want to say one thing, because this was something that was very difficult for us, is when we first started the journey of Promised Neighborhoods in our implementation year, it was very hard for us not to jump into what solutions or what we thought the community needed. Many of us are problem solvers. I wanted to jump right into, oh, well, I know what the community needs. I've been working here for a long time, and I've been working with this community and been a part of it. But I think part of it is Kathy would always mention, don't jump into solutions yet. Let's go in and do this needs assessment that I hear you guys are actually doing right now, so are we. But part of this was really taking a step back and going door to door and truly learning what our community's needs are. And based on what we learned from, everything, it was census data, WestEd data, school data, and then we added, 62 questions more to the survey, and then eventually we worked together with all of our partners to create a comprehensive plan. And really what this is about is we wanted to make sure that we created opportunities for our kids and our children. So based on that is, the last slide is what we came up with our pipeline solutions, which I imagine is very similar to your pipeline solutions. But we are now in year 3, finishing up year 3, so we have a year and 6 months to go. And the big question is, well, what impacts have you made? And as Elson mentioned, a key component is on a regular basis, we actually have data briefings with our community, because part of it is we want to be transparent, we want to involve our partners, show them where we're doing well, but also show them our areas that we need to develop. Because part of this is, working with so many partners, you all know there are some struggles. And sometimes we go down paths that may not be getting us the results that we need. But I think a key component, and what we've learned through our data, is to make real-time changes. And whenever people make assumptions in the past, one example is we're preparing a college campus tour. And for us, we're looking at the money, and it ends up being right about $6,000 to send our seniors to go on these college campus tours. So the question that came up during that piece was, hey, are we showing outcomes? The kids that go to these college campus tours, are they more likely to go to college? Do we have the hard data to show that? And we pulled the information, and as a matter of fact, kids that went on the college campus tours were 75% more. They had actually attended universities and colleges a lot more often than the ones that didn't. So many of the decisions that we make, we go back, and it's one of the common themes now is, well, what's the data telling us? But with that said, I'm going to start off with this first slide, and this is 3rd grade math and ELA proficiency. If you take a look at where we were at in 2013, it was 6.5% was math, and English language arts, where we were at 46%. The very next year, as we began implementing all of the different interventions, which one end, you heard a little bit about the ELL coaches. In-class tutors, we embedded tutors in every one of our classrooms. They do small group work, they're linked to the school day, they follow the kids into the after-school programs, and they do a lot of one-on-one work. We brought in some software, which is called the Chief 3000, and it focuses on English language learners. Our partners brought in computers for our kids. And we partnered with a local organization that also taught parents how to access their children's grades, Jupiter grades. So part of this is we did a lot of work not only within the school, but we actually worked with the parents and taught them how to access grades, how to get involved. And as a result of that, we saw these big gains in 2014, where we jumped from 6.5 to 36.9 when it came to math, and a 2-point gain when we were looking at English language. If you actually look at the growth over time, we jumped all the way to 51.6 in 2015. And here's one of our big challenges is, one of the things is the measure, the testing continues to change in the state of California, in our community. So if you look at 2015, we don't have data because the test changed. Yet, you know, big pieces, we were actually predicting that we were going to move up to 42%. However, the test has now changed, so our baseline is no longer there. And you'll see that in a couple of the slides that we have. A real key component to this, as an organization, our focus for many years really was providing wraparound services and any type of service a family may need. And I know you guys mentioned this yesterday. I see it almost as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if a family doesn't have a home over their head, they don't have food, and they don't feel safe, when a child goes to school, how are they expected to learn? So within every part of our pipeline of solutions, we offer everything from mental health services to food for families. We have trauma-informed approach that we incorporate with everybody, and we work with the entire family as a unit when we're working with them in any part of the Promise Neighborhoods, but in any part of the work that we do within the organization. Fourth grade. So as you can see, fourth grade, 2013, mathematics 9.3 jumped to 15.7. We put so much work into mathematics, they changed the test on us again this year, and we were expected to go up to 28%. If you look at English language arts, we saw huge gains, 19.7% all the way up in 2015 to 35.6. Part of what we're seeing within the school, we had at the elementary school 100 more kids attend the elementary school, and we saw an increase with children going to our middle schools as well. At one time, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, at one time our middle school had 1,700 kids, and the population went down to 800 because of the community's loss of, they didn't have confidence in the school anymore. We have open enrollment within our community, and one of the things that we saw within this neighborhood is many of the parents and the parents that are most involved, that actually their children are doing a little better, do a little more research, and they enroll their kids in the more affluent schools. So we've seen that happen over the years. Now, one thing that we've seen since Promise Neighborhoods is community members and parents are coming back. So we're starting to see enrollment increase. And even in one of our middle schools, actually all of our schools, we actually have space in the schools where we have staff stationed there. Our middle school, we actually had to give up one of our classrooms, which is a good thing because we, 100 more kids to get into that school. So we're starting to see families come back into our community and go to the area schools. Fifth grade. So this is one where if you look, 2013, we had a 3.1 mathematics increase in 2014 to 33%. We were slated to go up in 2015, but here's an interesting, this is what we saw in 2015, is we went down in English language arts. And the question was, why? We were scratching our heads. Here we were bringing in all these services and providing all these supports to the community, and what we saw is this dip. Well, one of the things that we didn't account for, one of the things that we realized is we had more children coming into the school that hadn't been a part of Promise Neighborhoods for as long as the other ones. So part of it, and we also saw some of the youth actually acting out a little more. So what we did is we actually brought in leadership classes for the kids. We linked a lot of the learning to the school learning to happen within tutoring before and after school. And but even then, is we did see that hit. So right now we're having these conversations and we're figuring out, well, what happened? What is the data telling us? And we're meeting with our partners to begin addressing that dip that we saw. Something happened here, I'm sorry. Back to, so sixth grade, one of the things we saw in sixth grade is increases. We started with 5.5, we saw a big dip in sixth grade in 2014, and then from 2014 we saw a huge increase from On one end, 20.3 all the way up to 36.1% English language arts, and we're projected with a big increase again in 2015. We're looking at an 18%. But again, same thing we saw more kids coming into the school in 2014, and we brought in all of these interventions. So a constant theme for us has been, again, taking a look at the data and looking at the data on a regular basis. So I'm going to skip over this slide, and we're running a little bit out of time, but when you take a look at average daily attendance, take a look at 2013, where from 6th to 9th grade, we were at 90%. We jumped in 2015 all the way to 98.5. And what we've done, again, looking at the data, working with the schools, we're part of the SST teams. Whenever a child doesn't go to school, whenever we see any type of trend there, we actually send a staff person out to their home. So part of this is early on, taking a look at if we see a student that normally is doing pretty well, all of a sudden we see a dip in attendance, we go out and we visit that family and we have conversations about the importance of attendance. And that's been a real big push for us in the elementary school, the middle school, and the high schools. I have a lot of data, but we don't have time for that, but I will just real quickly, post-secondary outcomes. So now we have 177 youth are actually in post-secondary education. This year we expect to increase that by 170. And their first generation youth, which is a key piece, is some of these kids when they started working with us mostly had D's and F's, and it has been incredibly challenging to work with the youth and to work with their families to get them to the place where they see college as a real option for them. And our big push is to make college graduation the expectation. And you saw a picture of one of the schools. We have college banners. We have so many different, we have inspirational quotes in the schools, all those things to start showing the youth that, college, we expect you to graduate from college. It's mood lighting here. So, community leadership. What did community leadership look like when we first began? And I think you'll take a look at community volunteer. A key component to Promise Neighbors is making sure you have parents that are actually attending the schools, showing up, participating. We went from 2013 to the parent volunteers, we had 56. 2015, we have 354. Volunteer hours from 270 to 4,193 hours. Community events, 2013, 51 to 585. We are out on the streets every single day. We're knocking on doors, any health fairs, anything that's happening in our community, we have our staff there and we have a presence. And the main thing is, our goal really is taking a look and making sure that we're bringing families into the pipeline. One of our biggest successes, we moved from having non-existent PTAs in the schools, bringing parent involvement, but the next step is what are we doing to create leaders within our community? And that's the question that we've been asking ourselves, and we've moved in now to a Parent Leadership Academy actually, and what they're doing is, as Kathy mentioned, we know that when we've done our jobs, we have active leadership within our community that is sitting in board meetings, they're civically engaged, and they're empowered and empowering other community members as well. So we do have a leadership academy. We have 24 residents enrolled right now. We've lost one, and our graduation is actually on the 8th. Unfortunately, Kathy and I are going to miss, we'll be in DC next week, but we're going to miss the graduation, but a lot of incredible work is happening. So, data. So this is the big piece, is data-driven. What have we done in order to access data? Well, I heard you guys use Salesforce. Early on, we took advantage of PNI bringing in efforts to outcome software. So we chose efforts to outcome as our longitudinal tracking system, and we built it from the ground up. We can tell you how many, at any point in time, how many students are in our pipeline, the services that they're receiving, and the dosage of services that they're receiving. So part of this is, as we look at the work, let's say our academic advocates are doing with the youth, we can say, okay, who's the most successful? and we can take a look and see what interventions they provided. So part of what we're doing is, as we take a look at this data, we share the data with our partners and within our programs and make decisions about different types of interventions we're going to have, or talk to whoever the academic advocate is. They can talk about what strategies they're using. But the main piece is we're able to use data for program enhancement and make real-time changes. We've also, we started with ETO. We had ETO with some programs within the organization. We are now, as an organization, utilizing ETO for every program in the agency. And the reason why we did this is we want to know when a family comes to us, have they been touched by another program, and what services have been provided to them. So we don't start from scratch, and we have a history of the services that have been provided for them. And on our end, that just makes the interventions that much more powerful and that much stronger for them. One piece what we've incorporated within ourselves and the STAT process. What we do is we sit with our partners and with ourselves, and we create a safe space, and we put all the data that we have, we put it around our room, and our partners walk around and take a look at the data, and we ask our partners trends that they're seeing, any disparities that they see, and we engage in real conversations and ask them what are they seeing, what changes can they make. But on a regular basis, we sit internally with our staff or with our partners and share the data and have conversations about data, different types of changes and trends that we see. We've actually moved in for any of our partners that we pay for service. We've moved into a pay-for-performance structure, where what we do is our contracts went from cost reimbursement, where we pay them a fixed sum at the end of every month, to performance-based. And when we first went down this path, we talked about going performance-based, and partners knew all of this, but when we actually sat down with them to go over the different details, originally we were thinking, well, we don't know how they're going to react to this, or are they going to push back? But those conversations went really, really well. Every single one of our partners agreed that that was the way to do business, and that they wanted to be held accountable for the outcomes. So all of our contracts with our partners have now moved into pay for performance. Our evaluations as an organization, I'm evaluated based on my performance. Our staff are evaluated based on their performance. And as an organization, we've had this performance-based focus for many years. We moved it into promised neighborhoods as well. Well, look at that. And we are open for questions.
No questions? Oh, there.
Yeah, I'll talk loudly and project my voice in this Avenues room. Hello, I'm Andrew Cedar. I'm the data systems manager over at DSI. So first of all, thank you. That was a great presentation. And I think that speaking personally, it's great to see what a promised neighborhood can look like, where trying to meet every child where they are and doing it in a responsive and data-informed way. That's great. I'm curious about how the promised neighborhood designation and the promised neighborhood funding shifted, if at all, how your organization worked with data. You said you brought on efforts to outcomes, but I'm curious how much of that practice and that culture was already in place before the funding came.
Well, we had efforts to outcomes and a couple of other programs within the organization. So we were kind of used to that. We also have so many government contracts. What it did for us, you can hear me without the mic, can't you? No? Okay. What it did for us, it really pushed us to try to do it organization-wide, which was really important. And then we had to push some of our other funders to convince them, let us use this. We actually, in our juvenile delinquency, we got the whole county to move to efforts to outcomes. But first I went to the other providers and got their buy-in, because I'm not going to step on other providers before I move the county. So it just moved us more and quicker.
I think the interesting thing is, as Kathy mentioned, is once we bought on to efforts to outcomes and our partners did, we saw in other initiatives people asking us, well, how are you tracking data and what are you doing? And on our end is we said, hey, anything we do, you can have. Because part of it makes practice so much better when you're sharing data and having these type of conversations. But I'll tell you this, think of incorporating this for 600 staff. And I think our learning was we started off with Promise Neighbors having one data person and countless meetings with Kathy telling me I need more people. But I think it's learning the importance of data and really learning that the path to that place, there's never an end point. Because as new programs begin and as your programs evolve, you're changing the data points all the time. And just making sure on one end, our big thing is we don't want data just sitting up somewhere. Is also, the great piece is as an organization, we've always looked at data. I think over time, we've become a little better at utilizing data to make real-time decisions. So the foundation was there. I think it's now where program managers, when they meet with us, and again, their evaluations are based on that. So part of this is they need to know exactly where they are at any point in time with the different solutions that they're working with throughout South Bay Community Services.
Hi. I just want to make a comment. It's excellent presentation. Just feel a little bit overwhelmed as to
I am overwhelmed.
how do you do all these things? You know what I mean? For an organization that probably has 10 staff, you know, I don't know. What are your what tips do you want to give? I mean, I don't think you expect that we can match you on this thing. But you know, what's your advice?
So remember, I had 6 at one time. So see, now I do nothing. I do nothing. So I used to have to work really hard. So you're going to have to work really hard for a really long time to get to do nothing like me now. But, you know, I was talking to Elson about this last night, and I was actually thinking about Dudley Street, and I was like, okay, they have less Promise Neighborhood money than us. They have a lot less staff than us. What would I do if I got plucked into Dudley Street tomorrow and I had to figure this out? And it's get the community, build the capacity in the community. It is all you can do. And sometimes the money gets in the way of doing that. We're having a struggle right now with one of our directors because she's seeing, one of her things is community engagement is what she's supposed to be doing, but she keeps leading them, and I'm like, no, you got to step out of the way. This isn't about you leading them, it's about you giving them the skills, the resources, and the capacity, and then letting them go. So that's all I can say is, and you build up a time, and maybe pick the one area that you see is most important. If I had to pick along the pipeline and I could only do one piece, I would do the Universidad de Padres and the work with the caregivers for the 0 to 3-year-olds. That's where I'd start. Because then you not only engage the babies, but you engage the young parents too, and you might be able to help them through job trainings and things like that. So that's what I do. I'd start at the beginning.
Actually, just a quick question. I don't even need that. Could you just speak to the role of the school districts and your relationship with them over time?
Sure. Now, we've been in this community since 1971, so we have strong relations with the school districts, with the middle school, high school, as with everyone else in the world. With this middle school, high school, it's rocky, and it's always been rocky because it's a political bombshell, periodically, then it's okay, and then periodically. So we had a lot of credibility with the school districts, and we had pretty good relationships. So we were able early on to get a data sharing agreement from both superintendents, though we had some community members who were upset about Common Core, who somehow then accused actually Mauricio of paying $100,000 for the data sharing agreement. So who didn't want to see the data and sharing agreement, so we really had to go out in the community, and the promotores did this and explain what it was being used for. So also the schools are providing the space, because we didn't want to use any promised money for additional space, so we said, look, if these things are going to be on serving your community and your students, they provide the space. Through portables, through some classroom space, as Mauricio has said. They also sit on all the different kind of committees, the education committee, those, and the two superintendents and myself, now I'm a superintendent too with the middle school, high school, meet periodically too. And in the beginning, we had sort of an outside person who met with us to keep us on task so that we didn't go with our own agendas, that this was about promised neighborhoods. The thing that I've had to do during the time that there was a lot of turmoil at the middle school, high school, is I had to provide a lot of the interaction with the superintendent and the board members. Quick story, Arnie Duncan came to see us, and I think it was a couple of days before the secretary was coming, and there was a VIP room, and there was, the regular room. His staff called to tell me that the 4 board members that were under indictment couldn't go to the VIP room because the secretary couldn't be with them. So I had to tell him that. It was wonderful.
I would say one thing that has really helped the relationships is every school has a school site plan. And when we talk about systems alignment in our partners, there's I saw a great slide yesterday where it shows the points of intersection, right? Taking a look and sitting with all of your partners, we're all in this for the same reason. We want to make change in our community. We have similar goals. But sitting down and actually talking about what common language means, what common goals mean, and the points of intersection. And in many ways with the school sites, we took a look at the school site plan, we took a look at our GIPRAs and our measures and said, where do they converge? Where do they come together? And let's align our goals. And a great thing that happened is one of our large partners, our Health and Human Service Agency, as we were talking about, the system of aligned contributions and all these things, one of their top level managers took it upon herself to align the county goals with promised neighborhoods. And that was amazing. I mean, the fact that she bought in so much that on her own, she sat with her management team, created a document, and then said, hey guys, did I get this right? That's when she came to us and said that, I got goosebumps. I'm like, okay, we're on the right track. We're on the right track, because that's when we will begin making population level change and true lasting change. Breaking down those silos. So with the schools, it's work with every principal. And there will be times that it's rough. Yeah, there's times when we don't agree, there are times when we fight, times when we're upset with one another, but I think they know we're in this for the right reasons, and we do talk common goals, we do talk common language.
And in California, I don't know how it is in Massachusetts, but in California, the teachers union is very, very strong. And in the beginning, there was a lot, although the teachers union was at the table, they were uncomfortable with the academic advocates, the guidance counselors who had 400 kids to a caseload said, you're trying to take our jobs. And I said to them, no, you gotta look at it another way. Because if this works and there's great outcomes, 5 years from now when I don't have promise number money, maybe the school district will put in more guidance counselors. And to start to see it in that manner. The same with the embedded tutors in the classroom. Are our employees, there actually could be teachers given their education. And we said the same thing to the teachers, is we said, if this works in this school, you might get it district-wide. And one of the first things they chose to do district-wide is We gave money for a music teacher in the elementary school. Now the elementary school district has a music teacher in every elementary school. So we really explained our strategy for doing these things this way. There's a book, it's called The Advantage. It's a management book. And it's a great book because when I read it, it describes my upper management team, where we fight, we argue, we disagree, but everybody knows that why we're here and that we have each other's backs. And we try to do that with the partners too, is to create that same environment. We do argue, we tell people, and they tell me when we're not doing well. And we're okay with that because we know they're not doing it to just be mean or that they want us to fail, but they're doing it because we want to succeed as a group. Yes?
I'm Maggie Austin. I'm from DS9, and one of the conversations that DS9 is really invested in is development without displacement. And I don't know the history of San Diego County around gentrification and development, but I think some of your school data, enrollment data, triggered for me that question around as you pour all these resources into this community and into this neighborhood, how do you create a conversation in the neighborhood where then outside community members are attracted to this newly revitalized neighborhood and school district and move in and push others out?
Right. So as an organization, we've developed about 500 units of affordable housing, but we've also now have decided that that's not something we're going to continue to do unless it's for big families. And so we have other affordable housing developers that we're partnering with. One of my former employees is running one, so he's doing some work. But the other thing that is going on, Chula Vista itself, where Castle Park is, to the eastern end, there's a freeway that separates the west side from the east side. The east side is our more, my associate director calls it, what does she call it? Foo-foo land, is the more expensive area. The west side has always been an area that's problematic, and then to the north of us is San Diego. The gentrification from San Diego is starting to come down to us. We've got Barrio Logan in National City that first got to go before we go. It's the same thing with the west side of Chula Vista, is eventually, because they're starting to finally develop access to the bay. Because in San Diego, the poor neighborhoods don't have access to the bay. That's where all the the cargo ships are and all of that. So what we're trying to do is, besides supporting the affordable housing developers, is the whole thing with community engagement, is to make powerful the people on the west side, to make sure that they have a voice in what happens on the west side. And we have our mayor always there with our promotores and really working that way. And also one of the things that I do know in the back of my head, I know during the recession, there was a single gentleman who bought a lot of the distressed properties on the west side, and he's holding them. So I know that we've already lost those and we can't afford to lose any more. So we're also working with the city on the city buying some land and holding it too. The other thing is, in our community, we have what's called inclusionary. So if you're a developer and you develop over 20 units, 10% of the units you develop have to be affordable, and we got it changed from just affordable to affordable for low income, because affordable used to mean like 80% of median income, which isn't affordable. So doing it through policy, because I don't think we can build enough quick enough, and we have to have the policies around it.
Just a quick question. I guess it's a reference check. We're considering using efforts to outcome, and I just want to know if you could speak to your development of your blueprint and work plan, and what was that process like? Because your measures will change. My name is Heavenly Mitchell. I'm with the Boston Public Health.
we went in, just some histories, we went into efforts to outcomes. At first, I didn't expect a lot from efforts to outcomes, but the fact that you can customize it in any way you want, and it's a very easy system to use. Our big thing, our big selling point is we wanted to be able to track and have information about every participant in the entire agency. And we wanted it also to be able to interact with other databases. It's a very easy system to use. I think it's user-friendly. On one end is it has dashboards. So let's say for me, I'm a director of the organization. When I pull up my dashboard, it gives me all of the information. We built it this way, but it gives me information about all of the different initiatives and what I think is key. But again, it's very customizable. It's pretty simple to use. And you're right, it's always changing. So in a way, it makes it easy to tweak fields and do all those things. Did I answer your question, or?
How was can you speak to did you work directly with social services in building the blueprint into that?
Yes. Actually, we began working with social solutions at the very beginning. They charge $150 an hour to make any tweaks. So right off the bat, we said, well, we're hiring a data person, and they're going to be the experts in ETL. So when we hired them on, they got trained to be an administrator, and they've gone through all of the trainings. And then we brought on 3 other staff that have gone through all the trainings. So the capacity, their trainings are good trainings, but we don't go to them for any build out, anything at all. We do it all in-house. And that's key. That makes it so much more affordable than paying $150 an hour anytime you want to make a change on it. That's what I would recommend.
A quick hint, if you're the first one in your community to do it, we now I sell my people to help people build out to other agencies.
You have a consulting business.
We try to make money anyway.
At half the price that ETO charges.
I think this is just a comment. So my suggestion in all of this, across the various promised neighborhoods, I've been playing matchmaker. Matchmaker. And so I think I've done a pretty good job with this match. And so I hope you all recognize that this is an ongoing dialogue between you and Chula Vista. My suggestion is to prioritize what you believe are the top 3 issues that you want to connect with Chula Vista around and drill deeper down those things. Perhaps we can look at some electronic ways in which you are able to bring key staff and community members into the dialogue. But I think the value of this is that you have a sister and brother community that is going through the struggle with you. So as you develop and look at other opportunities, whether it be through us at the Department of Ed or through foundations, you look at those ways in which you can use each other to basically share ideas and experiences. So my hope with this, and I think it was pretty successful, you have an opportunity to have a partner in this work, particularly around the connection between education and housing. I think that is going to be an emerging area for our country, particularly, as you mentioned, development without displacement. And remember this term in the next couple of years, socioeconomic integration. That is an emerging strategy that we in the federal government are looking at. And guess what? You all are the experts in it. So I applaud the work that you're doing, but I also hope that you will work closely with each other in sharing best practices.
Can I answer this question? Given the changing population, which is pretty consistent in a lot of sectors, whether it's the home or in the school system. So let's take the school system, and you referenced that, as you are trying to develop performance outcome, and you have a group of new students that are added to the school. You have that in other sectors too. So how do you maintain the integrity of your outcome data when you have that kind of process going on? You know, in academia, we talk about process and outcome research, and we try to help our students to understand the difference between the two. So in process research, we know that change is always going on. So how do you account for that with your results?
That's a great question, actually. We just had a conversation about that last month, and that's where the question for us of dosage comes up, right? Because part of it is we want to know, let's say a new student comes in, and when they've been in the Promise network, how long does it take to see change? And how do you compare those? Because we're seeing the biggest change, obviously, with the youth that have been in the program year after year. So let's say when we first started, second graders are now sixth graders, right? And that's where we see huge change. But the question is, what about those new students that come in? And are we able to pull that data and ask those type of questions? And we are. We've gone in there, we've actually made those changes witin our database to pull out any youth that have been with the program less than 6 months, the ones that have been with us for 1 year, the ones that have been with us for the entire amount of time as well. Because the outcomes are very different. And when you look at the data, and you looked at some of the 5th and 6th grade drops, we were scratching our heads trying to figure out what the heck happened here. It's not all because of that. I want to say that. Part of it is, there will always be challenges. But we did see that many of the youth that did come in did affect our data. And that's an important part is, what is your story behind the data? What is the data telling you? But we've made sure that we incorporate that into ETO, and there's a section that's story behind. So any of the data points that you saw today, there's a whole write-up on all those saying what played a role in making these changes.
And then the next step will be, okay, if the kids who come in and have less dosage, how do we bring them up to speed?
Right.
Because we've got to quickly do that. And we're getting kids coming in from Mexico, so it's even going to take us longer to do that. But we've got to do more intensive services.
Any more questions? Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So this is, I'm excited about this part because we've talked a lot about some things we're doing in partnership. But this is really, all of it matters and is very important. But I think that for DSNI as a backbone organization, something that is really important that we, and I'll talk a little bit about the challenge we have with doing this sometimes, is looking at impacts, like the impact that we're having and being able to collect, measure, and share data in real time. So that's a challenge for us. But fortunately, we're partnering with BC, with Boston College around this, and this gave us the opportunity and kind of the charge to say, okay, let's stop for a couple of months and look at how we're doing and what we're doing and what we want to do better. So Andrew and I are going to kind of go back and forth a little, but what I'm going to do is frame BPI, Boston Promise Initiative, just for you all, just so as you're listening to what he's talking about as far as lessons learned and the analysis that we've done, that you have a framework within which to hear it from. I know for me it's important. It's hard for me to grasp information sometimes if I don't know, like, how is it actually being implemented. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll get into the actual analysis, lessons learned, challenges we're having, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. And I'm going to time myself here. So I did just want to show this again. I know we talked about the Dudley Village campus yesterday, but I think this is just important to keep in mind as we're talking around who is in our neighborhood, what does our neighborhood look like. So you see the demographics there, almost half of our neighborhood under the age of 19. and then the size of our footprint. The map, you don't have to pay too much attention to. This was a map around, unless you're interested in civic, this is a map around voting in the neighborhood that just was in the slide, but it reminds you just what our area is. So roughly between Dudley Square, Upham's Corner, and Grove Hall is the neighborhood that we're talking about. So, sorry. So I do want to just talk quickly about structure and the structure of DSNI and how we are implementing Promise. And I think it's important, particularly as you're answering questions later in the afternoon about what we do next. So this is DSNI's board. I'll let you read a lot of it, but the important thing to pull from here is just that it's a community board, community elected. There's different groups that are represented on the board, different ethnic groups as far as residents, and then there's some other groupings around nonprofits and religious organizations, and we also have 4 youth seats. So this community elected board that's governing really what is DSNI doing, and what are the strategies that we're implementing to serve our neighborhood. For Promise specifically, so this is DSNI as an organization, and many of you know we work in many areas. For Promise specifically, we also have a steering committee and working groups. And so I just put up here just bullets around what a steering committee and working groups do. But a steering committee is really around strategy, overseeing the work of the backbone, which is DSNI, looking at progress, reviewing data, being champions of Promise, and then obviously representing the needs of their own organization, but also able to think broadly across the initiative. And so I would say as far as these bullets, so this is obviously like a definition. Our steering committee we're not all the way here yet. But we do have a number, so the organizations that sit on our steering committee are City of Boston, so Ron, who was just here from the Mayor's Education Cabinet, Boston Public Health Commission, Boston College, BPE, Family Independence Initiative, RoxMap, and I believe that's all, and DSNI. So that's our steering committee. Then we have a number of working groups. And so working groups are essentially made up of people that are actually doing the implementation. And there's a number of ways that that implementation is happening. I tried so hard to center this, and I couldn't do it. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, and I figured that you all would understand that it's not the most important thing up here. So, so taking all that I just explained, this is the structure of Promise. So we have DVC residents who are really the main beneficiaries of the work we're doing, but also leading and dictating the strategy. And so they feed into our board. As I said, our board is made up of mostly residents, which governs DSNI. And I wanted to make this distinction because the steering committee is more advisory. DSNI's board essentially is responsible for what happens at DSNI. So they vote on budget decisions and strategy decisions. But we have a number of other bodies that are able to make recommendations and focus on specific initiatives. So our steering committee that we just mentioned, and then from there, a number of work groups, which is the way that we organize partners. Most of our partners fit into one of these working groups, but not everyone yet is on one. So the 2 at the top, School Readiness Roundtable and Birth to 5 work group, were actually, School Readiness Roundtable you heard from yesterday actually was before we had Promise, and I'll talk about those 2 groups in a second because they're actually not meeting right now. The DVC Dudley Village Campus Principals Community of Practice, so monthly we bring together, there's 10 BPS schools, 1 parochial school, and 2 Commonwealth charter schools in our neighborhood. And so we're convening those principals monthly, mainly our BPS schools, but as well as some of the charter schools. Our DSNI Education Committee, which I'm talking about it here as a BPI working group, but it's actually a committee of the DSNI board. And that is made up of mainly residents and parents in the neighborhood who may or may not have children in the school in the neighborhood, but want to come together around education, strategy, and challenges. Our No Child Goes Homeless Task Force, which was something that came out of the planning of Promise, and that is less of not a monthly work group, but it's where we come together around the No Child Goes Homeless strategy and that includes Project Hope and Youth Harbors, also that Sister Margaret mentioned yesterday, who's implementing a similar strategy, but with youth, older youth. There are High School to Career Work Group, which is one of our planning groups, and so I'll talk about that in a second, and then DSNI Youth Committee, again, which is a committee of the DSNI board. And then just all the way to the right, you just see these are the kind of bodies that make up those working groups. As far as staffing at DSNI, I just wanted to give an idea of like the kind of positions that we have. So if you're engaging in some part of Promise, you're probably interacting with one of these positions or people. So myself, Katrina, if you could raise your hand, Katrina, who's our education manager. So a lot of the stuff you heard yesterday, particularly No Child Goes Homeless, and our some of the work, all of the work with the schools, Katrina's leading on that, particularly convening our principals. We have education organizers, so Bajuan, who's here, as well as Jose. So Bajuan is an organizer across DSNI who works on other issues as well, but is also supporting us in the education space. Leah, who's our BPI coordinator, and really is responsible for outreach strategies. So the Birth to Five manager and Birth to Five organizer were positions that we have had in the past that we don't have right now. And so those were, first the actual people in the positions vacated the positions, and then we just haven't rehired because we are in this space, and they alluded to it a little yesterday on the SRR presentation, but of figuring out what is our Birth to Five strategy and like what is the value that DSNI adds to the Birth to Five space. And so that's something that we want to talk about this afternoon, but just something to keep in mind. Our High School to Career manager, Carrington, who's back here, and so we do have a planning grant where we're thinking about for 16 to 24-year-olds, how do we create clear high school to career, college, technical, et cetera, pathways in the neighborhood that young people can take advantage of. We have about 20 BPI organizers, so similar to the community outreach positions that was mentioned through Chula Vista. We hire residents to do outreach in the neighborhood. Right now, their main focus is our neighborhood survey, where we plan to survey at least 600 households in the neighborhood around a number of questions, some specific to Promise, and then larger, we have about 60-something questions, where we're collecting data, and it helps to inform our strategy, not just through Promise, but at DSNI. You heard from Luz yesterday, who's our Fair Chance coordinator, and then Andrew, who's our data systems manager. So this is kind of the core team. There's a number of other ways that Promise is implemented throughout DSNI, but these are, when you think about the actual strategies, people that are leading the charge. And then I'll hand it off to Andrew here, but just if you think about what does it look like to develop solutions from cradle to career, this is what it looks like for a DSNI. And the bullets just represent kind of themes or focus areas under each part of the continuum. I'll just pull out a couple. I mean, under the Birth to Five, we've implemented a number of strategies, but I think the thing that we really come back to is the parents as first teachers, and how are we supporting parents in the neighborhood and getting their children ready for school. Under our K-8 strategy is really this idea around like connected neighborhood schools. And so how are we making sure that particularly the 10 Boston public schools in our neighborhood, but even our charter and parochial schools, that those schools are connected to each other. So both the principals and school staff, as well as parents in those schools, are working on issues together. And then in the high school to college and career, DSNI, way pre-Promise, has always had a youth leadership and organizing component, not always explicitly around necessarily academic achievement or college and career pathways. And so that's something that's really being developed. And all of it is undergirded by the work that DSNI has done for the past 3 decades around this family and community, housing, economic development, food, and arts and culture, creating this vibrant community. So I'm not going to go deep into this. This is just kind of a reflection of what you all saw yesterday. So these are 4 of our particular partnerships that you saw, but we have a number of other partners. So these are our sub-grantees. We do have I mentioned yesterday we have about 48 partners, but we have 12 actual sub-grantees, which means these are organizations, are schools that we get Department of Ed funds, and we are sub-granting some of that out to them. So this is the list of sub-grantees. The process that we used to bring them on in this way, because they were already promised partners or DSNI partners, we actually had an RFP process about 2 years ago where we put out, here are the indicators that we want to measure through Promise, and so these were the sub-grantees that were chosen, and we had a review committee made up of board members as well as some of our partners. Just something I'll point out on here, the schools that are in this mix, I am calling them sub-grantees here because they receive Promise funding, but there's also a commitment to the schools in our neighborhood, particularly 4 that were written into our Promise grant to receive Promise funding anyway. And that was because at the time that we applied, they were, 3 of them were in turnaround status. So the Burke, Dearborn, and Orchard Gardens were turnaround schools or underperforming schools. And then Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School, which you heard yesterday, we partnered with BPE around opening. Woo, all right, so this just gives you a little background of like how we're actually implementing Promise, so that as you're hearing, what are the lessons we learned, our challenges we're having, you have a little context for that. So Andrew, you wanna come?
Hello. Small but mighty. That's a theme here today. 48 partners, 24 programs from 12 sub-grantees over the last 3 years. A little over $1.3 million distributed back to our sub-grantees, to about 2,600 young people, and 100,000 program hours, or dosage hours. That's 100,000 program hours that, we're not including the time of our Fair Chance families doing their journals. We're not including the 350,000 hours of volunteer time that the Boston teacher residents put in. This is just what $1.3 million got us, 100,000 program hours. That translates to, in terms of 8-hour days, a little over 34 years of programming. 11 years if you're counting 24 hours straight. And if we average that to the amount of young people who we're reporting on, that's about a week straight of programming for our young people in our community. So among our sub-grantees, how are we evaluating? How are we evaluating the work that we're doing? How are we collecting our data? Here's just a little potpourri of some of the instruments that are out there right now that our sub-grantees and our schools especially are using to measure outcomes. I won't read them out loud because they're a mouthful, all of them, but to give you a sense of what the landscape looks like and how much effort there is, in addition to some crosstalk, in trying to measure what we're doing. And BPI is no different. We talked about this yesterday a little bit. We use indicators called GPRAs, which were set into law in the 90s. They're called Government Performance Result Accountability. Is that right? Am I forgetting it? ACT. Government Performance Result Act. Law goes into place, has a bunch of indicators that all Promise neighborhoods are using across the board to measure what they're doing. And there are indicators for the 0 to 5 babies, there are indicators for our school-age children, there are indicators for our older youth who are entering their careers. I've called out a few of our GPRAs where we're seeing dramatic increases. GPRA 6 is our 4-year adjusted cohort rate. That's a 32% increase from last year. And that's in large part due to the work that's going on at the Burke. N is about 60. GPRA 8, children who participate in vigorous exercise every day, 5.5 increase from last year. Students who have access to the internet at home, 11% increase. Now, the more incredulous among you might be saying, hold the phone, Andrew. Hold up. What's your baseline? That's, these increases don't mean much if we don't actually know what the baseline's from. Our graduation rate is actually around 80%. Our children who participate in at least 60 minutes of moderate to physical activity a day, about 20%. And students who have access to the internet at home and at school, that's about 97%. So there's a very wide variance there around what are our GIPRs telling us. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that we have about 20 staff. We're getting $5 million over 5 years. Most of that goes to our sub-grantees. And we have 30,000 residents in our catchment area. So for the Boston Promise initiative to really affect population level outcomes, that is a daunting challenge. And our targets reflect that fact. So, given that we know that there's so many causes involved in the community that can move the needle one way or another, no matter how hard we work on our GIPRAs, how do we know that the work we're doing is actually impacting young people's lives? So, here's some things that are working for us. I'll start from the bottom and go up. Designing alignment across community-based organizations. We're not a university, we're not an anchor institution, we're a community-based organization. We're organizers, and that means that instead of being case managers and providing services across the continuum to whoever walks in our door, we have to forge relationships among other organizations who are doing work in the neighborhood in order to get that work done. That said, I'm going to try to persuade you today that community-based organizations can affect and solve community problems in ways that anchor institutions cannot, period. And that reflects the fact that community-based organizations are agile and know the people they're working with through not only people's lived experiences, but also organizational memory. So, moving on up. For each of these, I'll provide some, this is going to be a little unorthodox, but I'm going to provide some concrete examples of pieces of evidence that we're using to start to move down these research pathways so that we can show our impact. Form partnerships around technology and research. This has been really effective for us so far. I'll talk later about a really promising relationship between us, the Family Independence Initiative, and Union Capital Boston. Eric's right over there. Hey, Eric. We've also had a lot of success just sort of trading survey questions and making sure that organizations that we're working with we're gathering data using the same instrument, or at least parts of the same instrument, so we can start comparing across neighborhoods. Applying proven instruments in new ways. This is part of being an agile community-based organization, and I'll talk about an intake instrument used by Project Hope. Finding traces of impact in data that already exist. I think that's pretty straightforward. We'll talk about Dibbles scores a little bit and in some detail. And then finally, using social networks to achieve outcomes. This part is huge, and I'm going to try to drill it into your minds right now. The GIPRAs, the Dibbles, the instruments that come from the outside and that we try to fit ourselves into, those do good work, but I'm arguing that social networks and social network analysis is a tool that represents the work that community-based organizations are actually doing on the ground. And it's going to be through social network analysis that we can not only do our work better, but also demonstrate to outsiders what our work actually looks like. All right then, so with me so far? Nodding heads? Great, okay. 10 minutes? Great, all right. So, Kyle Fagan, he's in the back of the room over there. He has done a survey among our Promise partners, and we're going, fair warning, this next slide, it's gonna look a little bit like what Dr. Boynton Jarrett showed yesterday, and I ask you to remember our adage from earlier about the web of many spiders taking down the lion. So this first question is just about how organizations within who are Promise partners are collaborating together. How are they doing work together? All right, you guys, deep breath. This is a social network analysis. This is a graph of the relationship of collaboration between our promise partners. The text is, I don't think you guys can read the tiny little text by all of these nodes, but I'll try to break it out a little bit. Organizations which are on the outside of the network have fewer collaborative relationships with other partners, whereas organizations which are closer to the center of the network, they interact with more partners. No big surprise, DS&I is right in the middle of this web, being a backbone organization. Feel free to come up to me afterwards, and if you want to see the details about this and know which organizations are where, we're happy to do that. Yeah, please.
So, does this copy, I noticed in your data before that it looked like the number of kids you were reporting on were just the ones from partners that you gave money to.
Right.
And I understand why.
Right.
Does this get you closer to being able to talk about the impact of all of the partnerships as opposed to just the partnerships that have to deal with money?
Yes, it does. Appreciate that comment. So, okay, if this is the work that's going on, what makes this work happen? So from collaboration, let's talk about communication. Here's the question that Kyle asked on the survey. A lot of you probably filled this out actually. Now I'm gonna go back one slide. This is what collaboration looks like. This is what communication looks like. Far denser, far more relationships among organizations. So, not only can social network analysis show us who's working with whom, it can also tell us who's speaking with whom. Capiche so far? All right, we're following? All right, good. Again, DS&I, can't help but mention, right in the center of that network, doing our job as a backbone organizing institution. Okay, so that's all well and good. We've got collaboration. We see how the communication goes. That's some good data analysis that describes the work that we're doing. How do we use social network analysis to move the work forward? Here's a question about the term of art here is incoming nominations. We asked organizations who they would like to work with in the future. Here's the graph. In the graph, Kyle has introduced a few more aspects of the graph there are a few more layers of information on this one, okay? So it's not just going to be organizations as nodes and ties as vectors. We've now classified the organizations and we've weighted the organizations. This is future work by incoming nominations. Who wants to work with whom? The larger the node, the more incoming nominations, the more people want to work with that organization. And we've also gone ahead and we've classified organizations by schools and those who aren't schools. Because schools are such a crucial partner, we want to call them out in our analysis. So blue, those are our schools. Size is weighted by incoming nominations, and then same network description of closer to the center, more connected, outside of the periphery, less connected. So that's just a little glimpse of how social network analysis can be used as a tool among community-based organizations to understand the work that we're doing and also to move the work forward. I'm going to move on, and we'll look at a few other pieces of evidence that have been successful so far. Dibbles. So this is a table, two tables actually, and a little bit of background. The Dibbles is an instrument that every entering kindergarten student in BPS gets assessed, and it's basically how well the babies are able to pronounce words and it's a way of measuring proficiency in language and in reading. A couple things I want to call out from this. One, this is a piece of evidence. This piece of evidence was created through informal partnerships between our organizations. Dr. Boynton Jarrett at Vital Village has an AmeriCorps member. She placed that AmeriCorps member as an intern in an office at BPS to make sure this analysis happened. And the reason we had to do it was because the boundaries of the Dudley Village campus are porous. We have students coming in from the outside, and a lot of our young people who live in the community are also leaving the campus to go to school. So one thing that this demonstrates, I mean, to be fair, we haven't shown statistically that this is significant, yes, but I'm willing to go on the hunch. We've shown that one, the Dudley Village campus is not an arbitrary geography, and that being born in the Dudley Village campus is going to affect your outcomes later in life. That there's a difference from those who are born in versus those who are born out. You'll notice in this cell right here, this one is 6.2%. We have a lot of students who are coming into the neighborhood who are performing well below benchmark on their DIBEL scores, well below. So even though we're a place-based initiative, we now have a mandate to find out where those students are coming from so that we can make sure that they're prepared for school when they come to the DVC. Last thing I'll call out on this table, so BPSK1 and other. That other is students who have received some other form of pre-K education besides the Boston Public School pre-K program. Among right here, DVC students who receive pre-K education outside of BPS do, on average, better on their DIBEL scores than students who were born outside of the DVC and who did not get pre-K education. The DVC has an 18% unemployment rate, median income is less than $35,000 a year, and only 13% of its residents have a college degree. And our young people, our 5-year-olds, are coming into kindergarten scoring better on average than students who weren't born in the DVC. We can talk all about this later. Couple more pieces of evidence. I'm almost out of time. All right. I'm sorry you have to squint. Please. Not yet. We're about to sign a data sharing agreement with Boston Public Schools. You'll see the press release, I'm sure. And once we have that, we'll be able to go back to this data and say, okay, where are they actually coming from? So, you heard from Project Hope yesterday about how they're trying to make attendance a way of understanding. They're trying to link up attendance and families' housing situation. We want to take that one step further. This is an intake form developed by Project Hope. It defines a family's risk across multiple categories: employment, housing, income and benefits. There's several other pages of this that I didn't screen grab. This is a heuristic that was developed over years at Project Hope. And through their expertise, we want to pursue whether changes in a family's score are reflected in their children's attendance rate. And you might say, oh, well, that's pretty cool, but what it means is that we can then build a predictive model using this intake form to tell whether a student who has a fluctuation in attendance rate might actually be experiencing a housing crisis. So that's machine learning, that's predictive analysis, that's some high-level stuff. And at this point, it's purely experimental, but this is a way that we can use tools which have been proven in new contexts. Okay, last instrument, I swear. I know this is a lot. Thank you for your attention. So, we believe in the power of social networks, of building relationships between organizations and between people to get this work done. How do we pursue that as a line of inquiry to demonstrate that what we're doing is actually working? Love this analysis. We haven't shown statistical significance yet, but we're hopeful. We have a very small N. We have a very small pool of people that we're working with. But our line of reasoning is this. Okay, if social networks are so important, then we should be able to see an impact on outcomes from one program, a greater impact on outcomes in someone in a program if they're doing social networking outside of that program. So Union Capital Boston, they have developed an app which residents and community members can use to track going to various kinds of community meetings, various calendar events. And so what we did was, okay, if social networks are working the way we think they work, we know intuitively that they're working well, how do we prove that? So we looked at a cohort of fair chance families who also use the Union Capital app, and we've begun analyzing whether those families who are networking outside of fair chance are getting greater impact in their fair chance programming precisely because they're interacting with their fair chance family, with their group more often. No statistical significance yet. You see a bit of an onboarding drop here, but that said, the fair chance families who are using Union Capital have on average a $200 greater savings than those who don't. Yeah, so social networks, old tools and new ways, agreeing on research and technology to move the work forward. And yeah, back to you, Sheena.
So I'm actually going to open it up to questions because I can kind of talk through some of this as we're answering questions. This is the last piece just around, so I talked about the structure, Andrew talked about kind of some of the promising things that we're seeing, or proven things that we're seeing, and then obviously there's challenges to implementation. And so I've listed it, this is just like, I know it's longer than this, but these are some key ones. The reason I thought I put these up is because listening to some of the conversation yesterday and just thinking about a number of things, the way we get funded, the way we're able to show impact. These are just some challenges that I think is important for our partners to know, because we're in this together. So I'll go through these, but please, people, start to ask questions, so you don't have to just listen to me go through these. You can ask questions as I'm going through them. The top, Andrew kind of already talked about the population versus program impact. So we are, through our programs and partners, able to show some impact, our progress. We haven't figured out the population piece yet. To Kristen's point, though, around the social network analysis, some of that is us, all of those lines that you saw, being able to put into one place the data from all of those partners so that we can show, put into one place the data from all of those partners so that we actually have a bigger story to tell. Right now, we're only really to tell the story of kind of the things we have control over. And that kind of, it relates to number 3. Some of it is, I would say most of it is just really a capacity issue. We have lots of partners, we have lots of residents, like Andrew mentioned, almost 30,000 residents. There's just a capacity issue on DSNI's end of being able to manage all of these partners and residents in those groupings, outside of groupings, and the data, this is our data manager. And so it's a lot of, related to the last one, a lot of incoming data. We get a lot of data, we get to look at a lot of data. We haven't really figured out good systems yet for analyzing and sharing it in real time, because that just becomes a huge issue. And so, obviously forums like this give us the opportunity to have to gather it and start to think about it, but just on a day-to-day basis, we're not often able to share this stuff in real time. So that's a challenge, because it definitely should be informing what we're doing. Val asked yesterday around does this organization know that this organization is offering this? And a lot of times, no, people don't. Like DSNI knows, and we're holding a lot of this information. You have no idea how much I hold in my head. But that's not really helping people to necessarily do better work if we're holding all the information. So it's just something to think about as we go into lunch that we need your help figuring out. The other 2 things up here, they're just children in schools versus children in the DVC, just an ongoing issue. It's actually a cross-promise, and there was an article about it somewhat recently, just around if you're really talking about place-based, but you have children that move in and out the neighborhood throughout the day, how do you create a true pipeline? This is something that I think about. So if we are working all the way from birth to 24, is the things that we're doing for birth to 4-year-olds even having an impact on our schools? Because are those the same kids that later go to the schools, and then when so the 16 to 24-year-olds, that work at DSNI, just as an example, they don't necessarily live in our neighborhood. And so we have so many different populations. So when you're really talking about creating a pipeline or a continuum of services, I don't think that children and young people are getting the dosage that they could be getting if it was the same children all the way from birth to 24. And so it's just something for us to think about of like, how do you create a true pipeline? Something that we've talked about is kind of the transition point. So when they turn 5 and they're going into school, you know, when they're going into middle school, coming out of high school, how do we help children transition? But a lot of times they are different children or different families. And then this lastly around promise branding, I don't know if this might be more of a Sheena issue, but you know, this is not to say that there needs to be, so Harlem Children's Zone, which Promise Neighborhoods is loosely based off of, you know, if you're in Harlem, you know that you're in a Harlem Children's Zone program. Most of these students and families that we serve don't even know they're engaged with Promise because they're doing it through partner organizations. And so when we think about creating like a community narrative and just the pride around it, and they don't necessarily know they're on Promise. The organizations know that they're a Promise partner, but because of that, are we losing some of the kind of essence and this idea of a movement if I don't really identify as Promise? My child's actually in citizen school, so that's what's important to me. Or they're a student at the King, so that's what's important to me. I have no idea. It definitely comes up when we try to get consent forms signed. Parents are like, Promise? I didn't know my child was a part of Promise. Because it's not the way we operate. DSNI is an organizer and planner. We're not a deliverer of all these services. And so just a challenge that comes up and something that we think about as we move forward. So I want to open up to questions for a couple of minutes and then give you some instructions before we go into lunch. And we'll continue to talk about these things throughout the afternoon, but we just wanted to, I think it's important for us in partnership with you all to really lay on the table, like, here's the things that we're trying to figure out, because we definitely have a role as the lead agency, and we're not going to impact 8,000 people by ourselves. And so we really need to share in these things and come up with some joint solutions so that we can have a true impact on the Dudley Village campus. So any questions about any of this or the data that people saw?
Changed for each GIPRA. Let's see here, 6, which is a graduation rate. That end was around 60, because it's one high school that we're working with. The GIPRA around exercise, that end was between 500 and 700. Those were done for our school climate survey over 2 years. And same with that last GIPRA around internet access, at 500 and 700 between the years.
Sheena, is more of a comment. I'm struck by how much of what I've heard has to do with the presence or absence of either a data tools or ability to collect it or share it. I'm sorry, Andrew?
Mm-hmm.
And it just strikes me that Andrew is, as wonderful as you are, I'm sure Andrew is, that we need more data capacity in order to effectively connect both the DSNI and the partners,
Yeah.
and to more effectively therefore understand what the impact of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts about a couple more items.
Yes, I'd love like 3 more Andrews. You know, yes, and I would say that from DSNI's perspective, what we are balancing at the same time as, you know, we didn't go into kind of who DSNI is totally as an organization. Promise is one initiative that we're implementing. And so some of it has to do also with our structure as an organization and thinking about, I will say that when I come into DSNI in getting this Promise grant is where really this data mandate has come from. We didn't have internal data staff before Promise. And so I think that as we learn more and as we realize more and more, like, okay, we have to show this impact, that we do have those conversations about, like, what is the capacity we actually need to, we've gotten the collection part down actually pretty well, but now we need to analyze and share. And so, yes, I think that something that we've talked about also is we have partners in this. So other people might have capacity or expertise that we don't have. And so how do we think about these functions, data, communications, whatever it is, like sharing it among partners? Because I think that Andrew mentioned around the data intern who's at Boston Public Schools, that was very intentional. Like BPS I reached out to Brian and said, we need you to collect some data for Promise. And he said, great, I can do it if you can help me with, I'm actually looking for an intern. So if you find me an intern, I'll dedicate one day of her day to Promise. I connected him to Renee. Renee sent him this intern. So I think that there's other ways we can think about sharing with partners as far as that capacity, because people may just have expertise that we don't have.
Can I add to that? We at Boston College are trying to figure out how we can be helpful in that regard. So Kyle he's referring to is actually a doctoral student here at Boston College in the Lynch School. Raise your hand, Kyle. Who is very central to the network analysis, and Amanda Weber is a doctoral student here, is also involved working at DSNI. So that's one way in which exploring partnership relationships just around data.
Yeah, I should have mentioned Amanda. I called her the tech person yesterday, but she's not really the tech person. She's our data intern from BC, and she's been
Want to raise your hand?
She's been instrumental this year, even in our reporting to the federal government, like pulling together information. And again, they're incorporating this also into their learning experience, so it's been really useful for us. Well, one thing that was great that I heard Elson say this morning around the upcoming grants is that the 2 years built into implementation for planning, because I think that though DSNI did have a Promise planning grant, I think that I've been there about 3 years, and we're in the 4th year of implementation. But I would say that my first 2 years was still planning. And so I think that I would say, as far as a lesson learned, there are a lot of ideas that we had and continue to have. But there's a big difference between that and like actually operationalizing this stuff and like who's gonna actually do it and how's it gonna get done. And so I think as much as possible in planning phases or even in the beginning of implementation, if actual positions can start to get connected to ideas or working more in partnership, I definitely, and this is something that we can still do, I definitely think DSNI could share more in the leadership of Promise with other partners. So this idea of Ron is gone, but Ron has brought this up to me multiple times that he does, I don't know if this is his own opinion, but this idea around collective impact of this backbone organization, that's not actually how it should work. He called it like diffuse network leadership, that it really shouldn't be on one organization to carry a whole initiative, because it forces you to stretch in ways that are not your areas of expertise. And so, I would, if we were back in planning, I would say, okay, who actually knows how to do this really well that can be the lead on this, so that we stay more in kind of where our area of expertise instead of trying to add on kind of roles that maybe just don't work well for us. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Emma from Vital Village Network, and I would love to hear from you on the challenges or maybe efforts put towards capturing what I see as the magic of DSNI, so that qualitative person-to-person relationships beyond just the fact that are you connected or are you collaborating? So how can we capture that aspect of the work? And secondly, a related struggle that I have personally in my work is how to have a conversation about data while maintaining a role for residents in that conversation and making them feel like they have a place at that table and not making it an inclusive environment around data, really.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah. I mean, as far as capturing the magic, I mean, this is a DSNI ongoing pre-promise challenge because DSNI is a very magical place. And there's so much that happens there. I tend to work into the evenings, so a lot of residents come in the evenings. And the conversations I have with people around, I helped someone the other day find their credit report, and I think it's small, but it's just, she felt like she could ask me. Maybe I look like I have good credit. I don't know why she asked me that, but just being able to, because of the relationships that we just have sitting in the center of the community, there's on a daily basis. I mean, our neighborhood surveyors go out and they come back with these stories of people making dinner for them. All they did was show up to their house to knock on the door to take a survey, and they're so happy that someone's asking them what they think that they invite them into their home. And so we're trying to just find better ways to do it. The surveyors go out with notebooks now, and we ask them to capture those conversations. But it is an ongoing challenge because it happens literally every day. It happens every day that there's just these connections that happen that I think that we take it for granted. We don't think it's just what we do, and so we don't really think to share it with anyone. But then when we go to tell people, I told someone that we had youth on our board, and they were like, what? And for me, it's like, yeah, we have youth on our board. It's been like that at least for a long time. And so I think we take some of that stuff for granted. So I don't know the ways to capture it. I think it's telling more stories, getting people comfortable with telling their stories, and putting ourselves out there to say that we're doing something special. As far as the tension with kind of data and residents, and you heard them talk about that with the School Readiness Roundtable. So one of the things they mentioned is as data got introduced more, particularly through Promise, the GIPRAs, parents started to fall off of the roundtable because they were like, what are we talking about? GIPRA 2, why are we trying to measure this? And it was really hard for for us to relay. I don't even think it was an understanding problem. I think we had a hard time relaying to people why it was important and putting it in different terms that people could actually say, like, oh, this is why we are capturing this. I think part of it is we've had to do this as staff as well, just talking about it as information. I mean, I think people hear data and they think that they have to have a scientific background, and it's actually just information. It's just telling your story. And if you ask someone to tell their story, they may have a different reaction than you ask them to collect data from them.
Can I suggest that I actually think there's a greater tension, that is true, but that there is in fact a finite amount of time in the universe, I mean, in each one of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the extent that if you're engaged in service, and part of the time you have to stop, capture data,
Yeah.
it actually does in fact reduce opportunity for why the people are at the table. And it's a real tension.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making a judgment about one or the other. I do know that at some point one can move further along in either direction. Right? I watch it with social workers, because that's probably one of those areas where you see social workers having to spend a lot more time writing down stuff and collecting information or data, or whatever you call it, and therefore not engaged in the work of. And so I just think that's real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just translating language. And at some point, those who are the gatherer of data, the drivers of collecting data, have to understand that, and data is like anything else. We get hungry for it. It's a beast that needs to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's compelling. Like, you start talking data, you show nice graphs, and my eyes light up. So there are many ways in
Yeah.
the activity that we want to engage in, and I think that's real.
Yeah. I would just add to that. I mean, I think it's our role as people that are doing this work to say that to the askers of data. I mean, not that we don't ask for data ourselves, but I definitely had a lot of, and Elsa may have heard in DC, tensions with Urban Institute. So there are data technical assistants for Promise, and I've told them, no, we're not doing stuff, or no, we're not, that we're not doing it, but that doesn't fit into how we actually practice. So we need to find a more natural way to do it, because like you said, we're not going to stop delivering or organizing to do this thing that is totally not related to anything that we do. And it's yeah, I mean, it's definitely caused tension and issues, but I think for me it's just important, because there's just a certain, this is nobody's fault, but there's a certain disconnect sometimes. And so I think that you have to accept your role as like the champion in representing the people that we work for, and say like, no, I actually think data is really important. So the way we do the neighborhood survey, it's a requirement of Promise, but we say, okay, we'll do it, but we're gonna hire residents to do it. We're not gonna hire a research firm, we're not gonna hire students, we're not gonna have students do it, we're actually gonna hire residents, because we're meeting our requirements around collecting data, but we're doing it while we're also giving residents jobs and creating a leadership opportunity for residents in a neighborhood. And so a lot of our last neighborhood survey, we did it 2 years ago, they then became, Luz mentioned those 8 people that started Fair Chance, those were our neighborhood surveyors. They were able to make a transition into our Fair Chance program, our initiative. And so I agree, and I think we just have to push back. It's uncomfortable, but even with Andrew and Andrew gets very excited about data, and we have to sometimes have conversations around like, okay, we can't do that right now. Like, it doesn't really fit into what we have to do.
Sheena, Dr. Franklin said this is the last question, sorry. But I'm actually not gonna ask a question. I'm just gonna discuss a little bit about your question, Emma, about how do we capture the magic of DSNI. We go back to last year's roundtable, we talked a little bit about a fun way to collect data, which are pictures. And when Dinah from First Teacher gave her presentation last year, she talked about pictures, one way to collect data. So with GIPRAs in the neighborhood survey, it's very scientific, but there are also other ways to capture data and the magic: pictures, videos, in events like this, where when you come in and we have the screen up with pictures from other events, this event here, this is a magical event in my opinion. I'm not sitting in the office, we're here, we're out of the office. So I think that there are untraditional ways of capturing and sharing information. And just to not forget that, especially the little guys, that don't have data teams. Record it, take pictures, take notes. As Sheena discussed with my neighborhood surveyors, they start off the first day with a backpack with just a sheet of information about DSNI and BPI. And they come in and say, can we create a flyer with about 311? 311 is an app in the city of Boston where you can send in concerns, questions, get answers. And so one of my neighborhood surveyors who lives in the neighborhood and is a homeowner came back and said, hey, people are asking questions about the neighborhood, and they kind of just put it on us. So what Alicia decided was, let's empower our residents to contact the city themselves, and let's give them that information. That's not anything that we could have thought about in the planning phase, but these are things that come up. And so from hiring the neighborhood surveyors, they're invested in their community, and they're able to connect more with the residents, so they're actually able to provide information on top of just collecting the data.
Thank you, Leah. All right, so we'll continue discussing all this, but thank you all so much. I'm really hoping that this helps to inform kind of as we wrap up in the afternoon. So I have some instructions for you, and then we're gonna go and eat lunch. It's a lot, it's like multi-step instructions, so maybe task someone next, maybe you remember one step, the next person remembers nothing, so you all can help each other. So what we're gonna do before we eat, it's gonna be kind of on the way to eating. Oh, it's gonna be back there. We wanna just get a group photo, just so we can capture some data on who was here. Obviously,
And
we have your sign-in.
We didn't pay Leah to introduce us.
So what you're gonna do is stand up, walk into the foyer, kind of from where you first walk in. No, walk to the back of the room near the tree, and Leah is gonna help to line people up. And so we're gonna take a quick photo. The faster you know your height, like help, and figure out where you should be. From there, you're gonna go in here and get your lunch. While you're getting your lunch, Carolyn and I, or a couple of us, are going to put out, so the groups, the number, the color that you have on your, you know what I'm saying. We're gonna you're gonna have lunch in your groups so that you can continue to discuss this stuff, but it'll lead to you answering questions in the afternoon. Okay, it wasn't really that hard. So, so first, everyone go back here. We're gonna take a picture, and then we'll direct you kind of where you should sit after you get your lunch. I have a microphone, so I'm just gonna keep on doing this. Some of your group members weren't here yesterday afternoon, so I handed out kind of the second side from yesterday, but if you could just start to catch them up. So for people that weren't here, to catch them up on the conversation that you had, as well as add any additional things. And just as a reminder, everyone is in a group. We talked yesterday about the 5 key elements of collective impact, plus some additional things we thought were important, so that's how you're broken up. And so you're going to first start with updating, kind of summarizing what was talked about yesterday and adding anything additional based off of what you heard today. And then we'll move into the action piece, but first start with that. So again, you're just discussing, summarizing, sharing with people at the table what was talked about yesterday. We still have, I'm gonna give them like 5 minutes. So if you haven't already, please move to the action items part, the question that's on there around creating an action timeline. We wanna be able to report out in the next couple of minutes. So again, everyone has slightly different questions, but in general, what the question is over the next 6 months, 12 months, and by the end of 2017, coming up with at least 3 action items and who's responsible for it. All right, start to capture your final thoughts. This is so exciting. No one wants to stop, but you have to. So this is how we're going to do the report out. And I know that you'll probably think of more things as other groups are reporting out. And so we shared yesterday kind of what the different topics were. I feel like it's Leah that's keeping everybody talking.
Can we have your attention, please?
Maybe you all can pass notes at your table if you have things you want to add while others are talking. But we have to be out of this room at 2. So we want to make sure that we're able to hear from people. Remember that, you'll be sharing this stuff with us, so maybe we can create a way for people to add more information afterwards. And then also, you all probably didn't get to this question because it seems like you're still in the action part. But there is a question about, y'all are so loud. There is a question about how do we want to engage people afterwards. So though you might not have gotten into it in your group, we'll talk about that as we wrap up, because this is great and exciting, and we have to figure out how to do this more often and share information more often. So I won't do a fun game like yesterday to figure out who's going to go first. We'll just go in kind of an order that maybe makes sense. And so I think the best place to start is around the common agenda, and thinking about the common agenda and shared vision. So for people that aren't in that group, there is a one-pager on your table, just around the collective impact key elements, but I'll just read it really quickly. So the common agenda is around all participating organizations having a shared vision for social change that includes a common understanding of the problem and a joint approach to solving the problem through agreed upon actions. And so remember yesterday what you all did was, through what you saw throughout the day, plus your own experience as a partner, this group answered, is there a common agenda or shared vision that's evident? Or what ways is that evident? What ways is it not evident or missing? So we won't go into that. We're gonna go straight into the action items that they came up with on what do they think over the next 6 months, 12 months, and by the end of 17, we need to do as a collective to make sure we have a common vision. So this is this group right here. So Dr. Franklin's gonna bring a mic over, and we're gonna have someone report out.
Good evening. So, can you guys hear me? Yes. Yeah. Cool. So our action steps, we just worked backwards. We started like 18 months, December 2017, with the grants over, and worked back towards like 12 months and 6 months. 3 concepts that came out of it for the end of 2017, December 2017, was one, a clear picture of students coming in and out of the DVC, but specifically strategies around those gaps, those transition gaps from students coming in who don't live in the DVC and people living in the DVC going out, is actually developing a strategy by then and implementing something that actually is closing that gap, plugging those holes. Developing a link between schools in the DVC and the universities in the DVC, like the 2-year RCC, 4 years Northeastern, 4 years UMass Boston, and trying to create some like actual connections, real connections for students to get into those universities and schools that can start from freshmen to seniors, right? Actually putting that as a concept for them actually going to college, a real career, yeah. So that's the end goal. If you're talking about 12 months for the first strategy is creating strategies and control. Actually, this is a separate one, sorry. So if we're thinking about like the whole concept of developing and plugging holes, really from zero to career, cradle to career, one of the things we thought about is a principal group that we have currently is really for for them to disseminate the information into the school and make it part of the school's cultures of this concept of cradle to career. Not necessarily BPI as a branding, but branding cradle to career throughout all the schools in the DVC, from elementary through high school. And maybe you could even talk about like using professional marketers who like do this stuff, like the See Something, Say Something campaign on the subway, right? Where everyone knows that as a concept and it's actually really ingrained in the way we live our life. And so I guess as far as like doing the cradle to career and plugging those transitions, within the next 6 months, if we get that contract with the BPS, we'll already start gathering that information, right? In the next 6 months, it could lead to like the strategy and the implementation. And well, within that is also establishing a clear mission about cradle to career pipeline. I don't know if we have that yet. I know we use it as a concept. It's definitely a Promise Neighborhood concept, but an actual mission around it, I'm not sure if that's there. And another thing that was brought up by a friend from Trinity was and his is creating a focused, engaged group of fathers to actually like, where are the fathers in the neighborhood? How are they helping their youth, their students, like move forward? And one person he thought about to lift that up was a family nursery center. So we're not sure as far as like 6 months and 12 months or 18 months, but that's definitely something that we should look into and try to figure out how could that help us move our goals forward.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
So Bajwan set a great precedent. That was about 3 minutes. So
We're on
we'll
a countdown here.
we'll continue with that, and then you'll have a chance to comment and ask questions. So next we're gonna go to shared measurement, and just thinking about so over there to Andrew. So this is a consistent form of collecting data and measuring results or effectiveness that contributes to the increased collaboration of organizations.
Thank you, Sheena. So, 3 action items, 12 months. Number 1, let's continue to collect what tools all of our partners are using to evaluate their work. We're already doing that a little bit in the educational space, which was up on one of my slides, like around Dibbles. Let's see if we can do that across the continuum. So step 2 of that would be, now that we have the tools, let's align our outcomes in the spirit of Chula Vista's work. Let's align the outcomes and have, so once we've aligned the outcomes among the organizational partners, we then build capacity within the community, among community residents, to support those same outcomes. And then finally, in 12 months, we actually have a shared measurement system across partners that is effective.
All right. That was about 43 seconds. That was good. So next we're going to go to mutually reinforcing activities, which is Katrina's group. Oh, there she is. Katrina. So we're going to go over to the far corner. So instead of each organization working independently from the others, their activities are coordinated to intentionally pursue the common vision together. So we've talked about that a lot over the last 2 days of people are doing what they're experts in or what their work is, but how can we make sure that these things are mutually reinforcing and support each other? Sure. Instead of each organization working independently from the others, their activities are coordinated to intentionally pursue the common vision together.
So we had a really, really rich conversation, but not about this. But I will say that, I'll just pick out the themes of what we talked about because they were a mutually reinforcing activity conversation. So one was around data. That's what we were already starting to do the work and really talking about using data, collecting data, sharing data. We also talked a lot about structures And so yesterday we'd had this conversation about the tension between resources being located in the neighborhood and resources being located at the city level, and how really that's not something to take lightly. And so really be thoughtful and thinking about both of those as being important. Is there any other? Also just the individualized cultures of the organizations we work with, and how really leadership and really getting to know each other, which is a lot of what we did also, really helps to drive those kinds of important activities. So taking the time, sharing the data, and being thoughtful. That's what we're deciding to do.
So you all are all great people. I mean, you all are all like good on the fly. So just given what you talked about, just think like, so 6 months, 12 months, next 18 months, like given those things, what's some concrete, 1 or 2 concrete things that can actually be done by DSNI and its partners to make sure that the things that everyone is doing is actually reinforcing each other?
So I guess while we didn't talk about this, one thing that was relevant was that if I use my organization, I have a citywide purview, and the DV neighborhood is a very small part of that purview. And that means that it's hard to get my attention to focus on, right? That's an inherent issue.
Yep.
The question, therefore, is what would bring what could make my gaze focus in that area, right? And one of those things is I suck at data. My institution is not very good at it, right? So you and I had this conversation probably like 3 years ago. So the carrot I need is a great data system so I behave better, period, in my organization. And so I think that's perhaps the strategy, is to figure out what's the honey that's going to bring us to the table that serves our individual organizations' selfish needs. Selfishness is not a bad thing. And I think that's the thing that will knit us together as closely as possible, is what's our shared selfish needs that we can't get without you. In this particular case, it's actually a data need, and we all sort of share that need. Anyway, that's my one random thought.
Okay. No, thank you.
Really quickly expand to that, and I kind of said that maybe that's a little bit more lower hanging fruits, within the next maybe 6 to 9 months. From my perspective, just understanding how Children's Services Roxbury works.
Can you say who you are, Ed?
I'm consulting for the Children's Services Roxbury, and my specific focus is actually on social-emotional development of from children all the way up to young adults. And I think that's part of it. But I think that, certainly I'm just thinking about what Wayne was saying earlier, and then just try to tie in, organization is already doing some of those work, in the community. And the question is that how do you bring that piece specifically, to the BPI project? Because let me use the example of school-based. Children's Services or Roxbury is already doing school-based work out. I believe it actually covers the schools that it's in this particular initiative. So the question is that how do you work together? Because they are, these are clinicians out there providing services in school, which is very open arms welcome by the principal and so forth, because they have to work on social emotional issues of kids and so forth. So I think there might be what a need is to have almost a very focused kind of conversation, let's say with Children's Services or with other organizations as well, and say, wow, we heard that this is what you're doing. How can we collaborate on that? Because that's really based on the needs of the kids and families as well as the school. So I think that to me that's a little bit low-hanging fruit, but also be a little bit mindful that even low-hanging fruits might take a while. But I think that conversation can be started. School years is ending, but there will be another school year coming in September. So during this time, if that is something the agency already invested in doing school-based work, then how maybe BPI, how can be a convener to facilitate that process again, to look at what can be develop, you know, even starting
Oh,
from my perspective.
okay, thank you. So we're gonna go over to the communication group over here. Katrina, could you pass that to Carrington's group? And so continuous communication is about consistent and open communication is needed across the many players or stakeholders to build trust, assure mutual objectives, and create motivation to pursue these mutual objectives. So to be able to have trust in even doing things that mutually reinforce each other, information needs to be shared both between partners and back with the community.
Okay, so we have 4 recommendations here. The first one identifies with just trying to figure out who we all are in the room and what we do, and so that the information can be shared, services can be shared. So we thought maybe creating a community calendar so that residents can understand what's out there for them. And we also wanted to make sure that it was available in multiple languages. We realize that there are families there at home that don't communicate because they don't have the ability, the skills, the time. Maybe their child is the only one who speaks English and not all the information gets passed on. And in some cases, even physical paper flyers might still be useful and effective for some families, as not everyone has internet access at home. Also, just with the reference of finding out who we are and what's going to happen with BPI and the collective unit going forward, holding conversations with the residents about, do we have plans? What are they? What does it look like? Do we all want to stay together? I think Katrina referenced yesterday, it feels like we're in a relationship and you don't know if you're going to break up or stay together. It's kind of, that's what I think of when I think of this. Obviously, that would contribute to sustainability. A great suggestion was to hold data sessions to demystify data for families that just don't see the benefit in the time that it takes to explain yourself, to your situation, to trust information to other people, expose yourself. So collecting data that is beneficial for everyone. Having information sessions across the board could be very helpful to everyone involved, to funders, to residents. Last one is, we spoke about this probably in more terms of the residents in explaining data in terms that are positive to them and highlighting their attributes, which is completely different from a grant and explaining the deficits and the needs of the community. Residents want to hear the positive flip on the story like the slide said yesterday.
Great, thank you. So we'll go to the Backbone Organization Group, which I think is this group here in the middle. So this organization, which in terms of BPI is DS&I, serves as a support for the initiative and coordinates activities between organizations and agencies, guiding the vision and strategy, supporting aligned activities, establishing the shared measurement practices, engaging the community or building public will, advancing policy, and mobilizing funding that's aligned with the goals of Promise.
Shared leadership, responsibility with the partners, so that towards sustainability. So find a way to ensure that the partners are in partnership with you in terms of how does this get sustained, keep going on, not just bearing the burden alone. The second thing was investing in data management system, infrastructure, human capital. Over the next 2 years, if you can put in a lot of effort on this. I know there's a recommendation around BC, partnership with BC on data. We can follow up with that. And I think that's been coming out all over as well, in improving sharing of data with partners. And I'm framing a research or learning agenda. What do we want to learn? What do we want to use with this information? How is it helping us? And then that way, if we know the purpose of that information and data we're looking for, it's better to keep everyone aligned to maintain it. And the third thing was around the challenge of children in schools within the DVC and outside, and we thought it's about time to convene the community, have these discussions, get their views, the schools, the partners, the parents, the residents. What do they think about education in the DVC? How do we improve this thing? How do we solve this problem? Let's even know, do they really want their kids to be in DVC, or don't they mind that they're going out? Or what does everybody want? What do they want? And based on the discussions, the things that come up, we can begin to work together on how to solve that problem. So these are
Great, thank you. And our last, but not least, because Juan's over there, so our group around who was talking about, I believe, policy, advocacy, and sustainability. So can you pass the mic to them? Oh, looks like a lot of not-its over there.
So we also talked about a lot of different things, but mainly two big buckets around sustainability. And the first is to bring partners together and take a snapshot of everything that we've been doing, all the programs that are going on, and looking at what's working, what should we keep doing in the future, who should be involved, and who should be leading the work. And then the second piece is around ES&I doing almost like a self-assessment of what we can be doing and what we shouldn't be doing or would like to be doing, but all based on what residents want us to do as well. So those are the two.
So it sounds like you all suggested a strategic planning process. Excellent. You tried to say it differently, but that's what it was.
We didn't go that far.
Good, well, thank you. So give yourselves a round of applause. You've created some action steps. So I mentioned this back at the beginning, but I'll reiterate. So what we plan on doing with these actions, please, I know you all reported out some, but if you have other things, you can add it as we're leaving. If you didn't, try to put some timelines on them, so 6 months, 12 months, et cetera, to make sure that, to give some recommendations on how long you think those certain things take. And so we're going to start winding down now and thinking about how we want to move forward. So one thing that I want to do, but I'm looking at Dr. Franklin because I know there's things we need to say as well. There was a last question on there around like, what are people's suggestions about the best way to continue? And I don't mean another convening, but maybe suggestions from ways you already work together, as well as suggestions you have for us are like, how do we keep these conversations going more frequently than having an annual coming together? I will say what we're going to do with this information. I showed you the structure that we have a steering committee, and so we're going to bring these actual actions back to the steering committee and prioritize, and then figure out who needs to kind of be in implementing certain things with us. So that'll be happening. Our steering committee comes together about every 6 to 8 weeks or so. So we'll be coming back together soon to look at what your recommendations are. But we'll be thinking about this last question. So be thinking about this last question about your suggestions for ways to keep the conversation going as we just do some final thoughts. So is there anything you want to? Yeah, I think we can start wrapping up.
You're going to mention about it, so.
Yeah, we can do that while we wrap up because there's some other stuff
Okay. All right. We're wrapping up first. I just want to say on behalf of Boston College, it's been really a pleasure to have all of you here and to host this event again for the Nelson Chair Roundtable. This is something that we have been doing for 9 years, and the last 2 years has been in partnership with DS&I and Boston Promise. And I really want to thank Juan and the work that's being done at DS&I and the reception that we have received at Boston College, and certainly the work with Sheena. And related to that, I want to acknowledge that this could not happen without support, and we have had great support. I have had great support. We've, called upon students at Boston College to help out, and students working with me. So, Ngozi here, who's a student at the School of Social Work, has been a tremendous help to this whole enterprise. In the back, quietly trying to stay out of sight here is Shay, my 2 doctoral students, and Amanda, who really wants to stay out of sight. But she has been great in terms of helping with a lot of things. And last but not least, I certainly could not have done this without a really, really important person to me, and that everybody has seen her name at the bottom, but she certainly is far greater than that, and that's my administrative assistant, Carolyn Looker, in the back. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Okay, so we're gonna have you all kind of collect your final thoughts. So I put out this question around suggestions for ways to move forward, but also, one of the things is kind of what are you yourself committing to do after today, as we think about this shared leadership and how we're all moving forward. I want to end on that, but I want to do some thank yous as well. So one to Dr. Franklin and the team at Boston College. Like, we wouldn't have this space or this opportunity to come together and reflect if they didn't support us in this way. So definitely giving up for Boston College. It really pushes me, and I think pushes all of us to think and to kind of reflect and gather information. So to him and to the people he named also. As far as on our DSNI staff, Andrew did not want to present, and I told him afterwards, like, you're a rock star, like, you did a great job. So Andrew, who is committed and has taken on this task of figuring out what we're doing and how to talk about it. So thank you so much, Andrew, for stepping up. I feel like some of what I said is stuff he told me to say, so he made me look smart. Also, the partnerships that you saw yesterday, as the backbone organization, we support these partnerships and have to play a role in keeping them going. And so particularly around our K-12 space, Katrina, who you all know, who's our education manager, she called herself the other day politely persistent. And so Katrina makes sure that we're staying connected to the schools and to principals, and that she just has a mind that just sees a connection in other ways that people don't see, and really has helped to keep a lot of these partnerships going. So thank you to Katrina. On the Birth to 5 piece, though Aisha isn't here anymore, we did have a Birth to 5 manager for years, and so Aisha Rodriguez, who you all worked with, also was really key in keeping those partnerships together. Even as we were trying to figure out how do we capture what we're doing, I think just her as a person helped to keep that group motivated and keep them together. And then Leah, who you all know, you've probably heard her at some point today. But Leah's our BPI coordinator. She came in as our neighborhood survey coordinator a couple years ago and has stayed at DSNI and really will do anything. That she looks for ways to support all the time. But really is the key in BPI as far as figuring out how we do community outreach and keep residents connected. So really key. So that's not everybody, but those are just everyone's helping to keep this work going. And then lastly, I want to say thank you to Juan, who, Juan is still fairly new to DSNI. I don't know if you consider yourself new, but Juan, so is our executive director, came last May, and this isn't his background, education, and well, not in the same way as he came from doing workers' rights and housing, and I feel like he's made a commitment to understanding what we're doing and how it really fits into DSNI and to continue the strategy. So it's been very helpful to me to feel like the work that I'm leading is fitting in and that it's important to the organization. So I appreciate that. I know, and the second time I met Juan was at the Roundtable last year. He popped up. He literally got hired the day before. And so he popped up to say hi. And someone texted me, like, you got to introduce Juan. And I'm like, who? And so he just kind of popped up and said hi. And then I saw him maybe a couple months later. So happy anniversary, Juan, as far as the Roundtable. So we're going to close out by answering the question of, one, your suggestions around moving forward, and also what are you committing to do after today? And it can be, you know, things big or small. I'll be reaching out to you anyway, but I want to hear what you think that you should be doing or what you want to offer to do. So we'll do that as we go around, and then we want to make sure that we actually moved our leaves for our tree over in front of the tree so that it'll be even easier for you to add on. So just, I know a lot of people have done it, and thank you so much for starting to populate our tree. So make sure that you get your final thoughts on there on things that have gone well, things that haven't, future possibilities, and I'm sure you will see this up in DSNI somewhere, representing kind of the tree of possibilities around Boston Promise Initiative. And so who wants to start? Just around your thoughts on kind of what's your commitment to moving this forward in ways that you want to make sure that we all stay connected. Oh, I'm sorry. Kathy and Mauricio, who came all the way from California. Thank you all so much, because I thought I was going to have to, like, beg them to come. And Mauricio was, I mean, we've probably only met at the national meeting. We have only met at the national meetings in passing. And Mauricio was like, okay. So really easily persuaded to come to Boston, but his first time in Boston. And so, you know, it's a huge commitment. It's a lot to go to another city to help people to learn. It takes you away from your own organization, for one, but I think they see the importance of kind of sharing their best practices and helping other cities to think about how they can do this work better. So thank you all so much for coming. Very appreciative. And thank you to everyone else. I can't remember anyone else, but I love all of you. So just in thinking, so again, the question out there of, you know, your commitment moving forward, and how do you, what's your suggestions on ways to stay connected in between our next roundtable? Yeah.
I love the way she commits, but I know everybody else is in the same position. Sheena will commit you and then ask you.
So who wants to start? And it can be your individual commitment, but also your organizational commitment if you're able to commit your organization to something.
I'll start, get on here. Some of the conversations that I've had here, as well as some of the conversations I've had with some of the surveyors, the discussion of the capital. I'm working with a lot of youth this year. Hired some of the Youth Voice Project, and I've got a group of youth from the community. And I think that I'd like to get together with some of the Union Capital folks and discuss with DSNI about getting I know that we have been trying to get that youth group together, and maybe we can revisit that now that I have more of a captive audience.
Okay.
And again, based on some conversations and some of the things I've heard here, as well as some of my own personal concerns. I went to school at 11 Mayhew Street in Dorchester, now a charter school. But not one college or one university came in to speak to me or my class. Now, flash forward, I'm going to say 10 years. It's the same thing. UMass, right there. You know, all these colleges and universities around us. So what I'm going to do is take the initiative of trying to get that going. And I will volunteer to do that. Right. That's what I have to say. Anybody else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
so close.
It's so crazy.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ramon Soto, and I work in the mayor's office under the leadership of Chief Ron Dorsey in the Education Cabinet. And so I feel like I'm a little bit of an outlier in this respect, since we do so much broadly within the city, but also because of the fact that I'm actually going to be going to grad school full-time for the next year, this upcoming school year. So I will commit to finding a way. Part of my application essay, whatever you want to call it, was specifically talking about the work that I've done in the city, working with Katrina and Christine and Project Hope, and kind of scratching away and banging at the system and trying to figure out how we can make it work for everyone. And so in my essay, I talked a lot about equity, empathy, and education. And for me, that's a lot of what Boston Promise, that's what the promise is, really. And so I will commit to, over the course of this next year, figuring out a way to make my grad school education work into the work that is happening over here, and hopefully also infiltrate the work that's happening in the city, and I'll come back as an even better partner.
Great, thank you. So Ramon said he's writing his thesis about BPI. That's awesome.
Okay, so not exactly that.
Oh, yeah. Government, so. Yeah.
I am Emma from Vital Village, and I can only speak for myself because I don't know how Renee feels about me signing Vital Village up for something, but I came in to the School Readiness Roundtable as it was, I don't want to say on its way out, but as it was diminishing the parents were no longer as big a part of the discussion as it once was, and so I want to commit myself to ensuring that such an incredible group of residents and organizations and people continue to meet in the organic, magical way that they have.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Heavenly Mitchell again from the Boston Public Health Commission. I can't speak on behalf of the entire Boston Public Health Commission, but I can speak on behalf of the programs that I oversee, which is Healthy Start Systems, and we are committed. I don't make promises, so I'm not going to promise, but I am committed. And Sheena, I'm calling you like Monday, Tuesday, or so I am committed.
Yeah.
Good afternoon again. I'm Catherine Wong, Director of Urban Outreach for the Lynch School. In addition to just continuing to stay involved with Sheena, as both AJ and I have for a very long time, one connection that I definitely want to make is I was listening to everyone talk, and the ways that we continue to keep work is there's an organization that I work with out of Oakland called Education, Excellence, and Equity. And we have put together sort of an assessment that allows young people to look at their own cultural resiliency and then transfer it into academic achievement. And so I would like to introduce you to the executive director, and we call it the ESAT. It's a play on the SAT, with the idea being that instead of testing young people on what they don't know, why aren't we assessing them on their cultural resiliency? The fact that, if you speak more than one language, you're not necessarily an ELL learner. You actually have enormous linguistic capital. And so wanting to really introduce that level of assessment as we think about data, that there are ways to collect it that, again, make the young person be the central to their own learning process. So I'm committing to do that within.
Thank you.
So I feel like I went away for 4 months, Sheena, and I came back and there was no 0 to 5 group. So I'm committed to reach out to you tomorrow and tell you we need to start back that 0 to 5 group, and I will help you get it restarted.
Thank you.
Whether you want it or not.
Where were you, Wayne, for 4 months?
I was in Bolivia, Belize, Spain, and Croatia. I went to walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and if you have not done it, take a pilgrimage. It's worth it.
I know. I went to school for education, so I learned about wait time. Because, sometimes people are uncomfortable with it. But if I wait long enough, you'll say something.
I made a lot of connections with different presentations and things people said in conversation with like, oh, I read about that somewhere. Like, I read academic articles just for funsies because I'm a nerd like that. So I feel like I need to like go look at all those articles again and forward them to all the people who said something that made me think of that article, whether they've seen it already or not.
So I spend a lot of time thinking about data. And before Wayne starts our early datahood conversation again, I'm just going to volunteer to continue conversations about data, particularly when we think not only at the city level, but also at the state level. And then in terms of suggestions for continuing the conversation, if we're all participating in working groups, one of the places that might be nice just to get an update about the other working groups is at our working group meetings. Because one of the things that I found really enriching in the last day and a half was hearing more about what No Child Goes Homeless and what BTR is doing. And I just, even though I see you all on a regular basis, those are not things we talk about. Yeah. So even just raising my awareness of them would be helpful, and then the conversation can go from there.
Great. She's like, I guess so. Okay.
I'll stop, and Kristen just really put me on the spot. Actually, so I'll just say what's going through my head. What's going through my head is that this has been a great learning experience for me, and you filled my head with all of these interesting ideas, both about the content of the work, but also about the role that DSNI plays as a social organizer. Sheena, I can say that I was just thinking, I'm literally just telling you what's in my head. I was just thinking about how much I've learned from you in the last 2 days about letting the process unfold in a natural way and letting the content come out of the people in this room. And that can apply to so many other things, and obviously it needs to apply to what's going forward. So I have to say in action.
Continuing to plan with DSNI.
Absolutely. That's an easy one. Thank you.
We'll have two more, if there are two more people that just want to give action steps. Oh, and Ngozi.
This one, Sheena.
And Ngozi's always trying to assign me things.
Commit to working with Sheena the next couple of weeks to find out how to engage and keep everyone informed to next year, so that the process and the discussions keep going on, even if it's within the groups, or whatever way we decide is the best way to keep everyone engaged. Come together again next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ngozi is a student here, but she also works 2 days a week at DSNI, so she means that.
So you just joined our team, Ngozi.
One, yeah. One.
I'm the last one.
I think you just waited so you could say that.
So as you know, I'm 1,000% committed to this work, and DSNI is also committed to this, and I wanted to ensure that we, in some ways, continue this work. It's not going to be probably the same way at some point, but I think we're strategizing and trying to sort of figure out how we continue this and be effective and strategic and tactical and all of that. As Gina knows, I come from organizing, and we got to be tactical and we got to be strategic, and I think that's what we are looking at. At DSNI, and I'm glad that Susan said this, we believe in the process, and the process is very intentional at some point. But, that's our way. The process is our way, and we are going to continue working through this process to ensure that our children, our community, want to achieve, again, the best education, and also our community gets the best economic opportunities that they deserve. So anyway, so we're very committed. I'm very committed. So we will continue and we will come back here next year, right, Dr. Franklin? Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. All right, thank you, everybody. And I know if you didn't say an action, it's just because you were like, oh, I don't want to say mine in front of other people. So you can come tell me, or I'll call you and find out what yours is. When Ngozi and I figure out how to follow up with you. So we're done. Thank you all so much for the last 2 days.